Michigan. And so we were called in to do a 2-hour live show. We went from 2 to 4, then went back to our college football bowl season coverage. If you missed that show on Friday, Sean and I just kind of hung out and chopped it up. We brought in Scott Mitchell. You can go to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. It's also up on the podcast page as far as our show, The Drive. That's available wherever you get your shows. It was a fun 2-hour show, did some TV that night. Of course, this is a massive, massive story that continues to dominate the news cycle. As after 21 years as the head coach of Utah football, Kyle Whittingham is moving to Ann Arbor. Now, a lot of layers here. We're going to get to as many as we possibly can because some new information continues to surface, feels like every 10 or 15 minutes. What is next for Utah football? Who is Coach Witt targeting to join him in Ann Arbor on the coaching staff for Michigan football? Could some players be on the way as well? Now, only time will tell what the rest of the story looks like and how it plays out. But we'll give you everything that we have today as far as information and also what exactly happened here. I don't know if I love the whole, who do we blame? Because it feels like there are just bits and pieces of things regarding all sides that probably could have and should have been handled a little bit differently. But we'll get to pretty much every layer of this that we're aware of as of now. And, of course, Utah football still has a football game to play coming up this week. Utah will take on Nebraska in the Vegas Bowl on New Year's Eve. Porter Larson, the producer of this show, will have our pregame coverage for you. Then kickoff live in Vegas will be at 1:30 coming up on Wednesday. So we'll do a live show today. We'll do a live show tomorrow. We'll make way for Utah football on Wednesday. We'll take New Year's Day off. Then we'll be back on Friday. A little programming, scheduling note for you guys as you continue to make us a part of your day, which we really appreciate. So that's going to dominate the bulk of the show. It's always interesting, doing media in this market for as long as I have. You can tell the magnitude of the story based off of how many people outside of Utah want to talk about it. The last time that I've kind of been in this space is when Gordon Hayward left the Utah Jazz as a free agent. I was on radio shows in Boston, in New York, all over the country, and I've done 4 or 5 hits over the course of the weekend into this morning, including waking up. I want a little credit here because we're going to bring in Bill Bush today. I woke up at 6:45 to do a radio hit today. I don't wake up at 6:45 for anything unless it's an emergency, and we did that this morning. So a lot to get to on the program. We'll bounce around a little bit because the Utah Jazz are going to bleep around and find out what it's about being in the middle of pro basketball, in the middle of a rebuild. I give them a lot of credit for playing better as of late. Keontae George has been awesome. But the Jazz have interesting decisions to make moving forward. And I wonder if the recent run of play has changed anything for them. So, mostly football on the show today, college and pro. It was a chaotic day yesterday of NFL football. With a lot of big games going down to the wire. Most of the playoff spots are actually locked up, but there's one in each conference that still needs to be decided. Tonight's game means nothing. The Falcons have been eliminated. We've got the Rams-Falcons, Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. The Rams have already locked in the playoff spot. I don't think they can move up. As a result of the Niners and the Seahawks will battle for the division coming up next week. But you do have Monday Night Football on your television tonight and on your radio tonight as well as the Rams take on the Falcons. All right, good guest list for this Monday show. We'll start things off with Scott Mitchell. We'll get Scott's take on the latest with Coach Witt to Michigan. We'll get a little preview of Utah, Nebraska for the bowl game with Scott. I referenced Coach Bill Bush, who's won a national championship and coached on Utah's staff. One of the guys responsible for recruiting Alex Smith. I was on Bill's radio show in Lincoln this morning, so he's going to return the favor and join us this afternoon. Kyle Bonagura, ESPN, one of the best college football writers out there. We're going to leave the hardcore journalist stuff to the Kyle Bonaguras, the Chris Kamranis of the world. I'm sure at some point the comprehensive story of what we've all experienced in this market over the past couple of weeks will come to the surface. And then our friend Tony Parks, voice of the Bees, radio buddy of mine for a long, long time, and also lifelong Michigan fan. So we'll see how Tony's feeling about Coach Witt taking over at the school that he polls for. It seems like this has been summarily celebrated, say that 10 times fast, as far as a home run hire for the University of Michigan. So Scott Mitchell, Bill Bush, Kyle Bonagura, Tony Parks, me, Spence Checketts. All of you, the great listeners, hello. Happy Monday. Hope you're having a great holiday season. And that guy, Porter Larson, on a Monday. Kind of a quiet news cycle since you and I were last on air a few days back.
Yeah, really nothing to catch up on. It's been slow, pretty boring since we last hung up. No, but in all seriousness, obviously a bunch to catch up on and a short week to do it. Of course, with the New Year's holiday and getting back to a little bit of time off. But as you said, we gotta cover this stuff when it's a story this big. When it's bowl week, when it's NFL playoff push, there's plenty to get to, a good guest list to do it with. And now that the cookie has crumbled, if you will, we can get into some stuff that maybe we were coy about for the last couple weeks or so.
Yeah, there's some things, quite frankly, I would love to get 2 or 3 people completely on the record to corroborate all the rumors that I've been hearing. But I have landed in the space where I think I have a pretty good idea of how this all went down and why, and we'll unpack that on the program today. Scott Mitchell, our first guest. But before we get to Scott on a Monday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends and your good friends at Prize Picks, it's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN 700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
The holiday season, kids, the best time of year for sports. We've got bowl games, basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while you and I are out here making decisions every day, what gifts to buy, what to eat, which game to watch, there's one place where it feels good to be right, and that is on Prize Picks. Right now, they've got a couple of different promotions. They've got early payouts. If your lineup gets off to a hot start, you may now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. Your fantasy football season is likely over, but you can play fantasy football all season long on Prize Picks. Just pick your favorite players. When they hit their projections, you can win up to 2,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup, because on Prize Picks, it is good to be right. Okay. Whew. Let's go over it. So Friday morning, as I referenced, we were all off for the holidays. Of course, Christmas Eve, Christmas, then the day after Christmas, we were set to take some time off. And then, boom, the phone starts blowing up. And the announcement comes down that Kyle Whittingham had accepted the head coaching job for the University of Michigan, a possibility that we actually discussed on the show. I guess it's 3 Fridays back now. I mean, this is kind of the week of the year where you're like, wait, is it Monday? Not really sure what's going on. So timelines are a little bit complex, certainly with a lot of chaos that's gone down with this story. But, we get the Friday news dump that Coach Witt is stepping down. It doesn't say retire. We get the report from Mandel that he's still interested in coaching. And then during that time frame, Sharon Moore loses the Michigan job in historic fashion, spectacular historic fashion. And we started to kind of connect the dots a little bit on the show. I hadn't heard many people talk about the possibility of Witt to Michigan. Sean and I discussed it. Gordon Monson writes a piece for the Trib. Michigan strikes out with Kalen DeBoer. They strike out with Kenny Dillingham. And suddenly, they were kind of in the same place Penn State was before they hired Matt Campbell. They just needed a safe hire. And they needed it yesterday. I mean, the transfer portal opens up coming up on Friday of this week. And Michigan, according to their own interim coach, Biff Poggi, was about to lose between 25 and 30 players. And they still might, by the way. We've got to wait for some of this stuff to become official. And then we start to hear some national conversation about, wait a second, Witt to Michigan actually does make sense. And the Joel Klatz of the world start talking about it. And ESPN starts writing about it. And there appears to be momentum that led us to doing a show after the prediction markets actually had Kyle as the favorite to land the job. I have no idea how these platforms are doing this. They seem to be able to accurately predict everything, and they had it first. Suddenly you pull up Kalshi or Robinhood or whatever else, the prediction markets have, whatever platform, and Coach Witt is not just the favorite to get the Michigan job, but it starts moving further and further in the direction, and then boom, on Friday, the word comes down. So called in, we do a 2-hour show. Sean and I sat down. Sean joined us via Zoom. I rolled into the studio to do a 2-hour kind of emergency pod, and it's up on our website to kind of react to it. And then, of course, over the weekend, the conversation has continued both locally and nationally about what comes next. And this is the space where we're going to do the thing to hold multiple thoughts in our head at the same time. Multiple things can be true. 2 things can be true. This can be excellent for Kyle, and it can be excellent for the University of Utah. Now, it's a results-oriented business, but only time will tell. There's a lot of conversation about people in the marketplace that believe Utah did Whit dirty. I can't corroborate that. And Kyle himself was asked about it on Sunday morning in Orlando, dressed in Michigan blue and yellow, which, as I tweeted out, reminded me of seeing Karl Malone in a Lakers jersey for the first time. It just was an odd visual and will take some time to get used to. And Whit gave the answer that you expected Kyle to give. It's not like he's going to use this platform, being announced as Michigan's head coach, to run anybody down. That's not his style, nor would that be, conducive to any sort of progress in his new endeavor. So he handled the question the way that you expected him to handle it. Okay, so we didn't get anything there. So we move over into the space about A, how this all went down, and B, what comes next. And the best I can tell is that most everybody around the athletic department or at the University of Utah was operating off the assumption that this was the final year that Kyle was going to coach. And I think this is where the communication structure broke down. And if your communication structure breaks down, you're in a bad place, whether it's a football coach or a relationship. That's just how it goes, right? So the message was sent by Kyle himself a handful of years ago that he did not want to be a football lifer. He did not want to go the way of his father, who he loved and admired, and he was his hero. And he did not want to overstay his welcome. So Morgan's the head coach in waiting, and it's been about 6 years since he received that moniker, because I think most people thought Kyle was going to retire maybe a year or 2 ago, as opposed to even staying through last year. And I don't think it makes Kyle unique to face the prospect of walking away from a career that A, he's still elite at, and B, still has the energy for. I think that happens all over the place. I mean, I think it's happened with my dad and a lot of sports executives, a lot of players, a lot of coaches just have a hard time saying goodbye. They have a hard time, figuring out what to do in the next step of life. That's why we see players play far too long. And that's why we see Patrick Ewing wearing a Sonics jersey, or Akeem Olajuwon wearing a Raptors jersey, or Michael Jordan taking 40 shots as a Wizard. Even if you still think you have it, oftentimes you don't, but you hold on as long as you possibly can. So I don't think that's something that makes Kyle unique, but I also think it led to some uncomfortable communication breakdowns between Kyle, the athletic department, and then maybe most importantly, big money boosters and donors that, from what I can tell, a lot of them were ready for this change. Okay. So there's a conversation about the way Mark Harlan has handled this. And here's where I want to kind of walk us through this exercise. I can't really corroborate any of the whole, okay, Kyle didn't like Mark didn't like, I have no idea, okay? Only those two know as far as how their relationship is or was, and was there some sort of breakdown along the lines? I don't know. But if we operate with, I'm going to say, the knowledge that Whit had lost the support of some big money people, and those big money people call the athletic director and say, look, I am not donating to pay his salary. I'm not donating for NIL endeavors. You will not see a check from me this year if this change of guard doesn't happen. I think a lot of the big money people were ready for Morgan. I think a lot of the big money people thought Kyle had kind of coached his tenure. I'm not going to completely draw the Majerus parallel, because Rick Majerus emotionally abused some players, right? And he was essentially forced out because of his own bad behavior. But he had also really worn out his welcome for a lot of people up on campus. It was like, we get it, you get results, but you treat people so horribly that we really can't have you around, because it's kind of dangerous at this point. So Rick, as a result of a piece that the Trib did about some really horrible behavior he had as a head coach, was essentially handed his walking papers by Dr. Hill and the big money people that were donating to Utah basketball at the time. This is different because there wasn't some sort of bad behavior from Kyle. It's the exact opposite, but it's the same where a tenured coach had lost the support of people that help pay Utah's bills. So if you're Mark Harlan, I just don't know that you have a choice. Like if we'll just say maybe two of your three biggest boosters have made it clear that if Kyle comes back, they're out. Okay. And if you're Mark, you just don't have a choice. You don't. Okay. And the other piece of information that seems to be permeating its way throughout the community is not only did Kyle change his mind about wanting to coach next year, he actually asked for an extension and more money. And that's when the folks in charge said, no, we've had this plan in place for years now and no more. Okay. So if you want to go coach somewhere else, please go coach somewhere else. We're happy to give you a hug and say thanks for everything and go do your thing. Did that make Kyle feel disrespected? I would imagine the answer to that is yes. And I understand his position. Looking around saying, wait a second, do you remember what this program was before I became a part of it and then took it over? And now we're sitting here as a P4 team that had won Pac-12 championships. I took you to 2 Rose Bowls. Okay, it's different now because of me. I'm not saying Kyle would have said that. I understand if that's his sentiment, right? So I don't know that this was some scenario where he was absolutely forced out. I feel like this is probably a scenario where he kicked the tires on coming back, asked for an extension and more money, and the plan that was in place was something that the people in charge wanted to continue to go with, and then boom, right? So a little serendipity for Kyle that one of the top 5 college coaching jobs in America becomes open, and the first couple of candidates they were interested in did not want to talk to them, and so Witt lands in Michigan. I think it's a home run for Michigan. I think it's a great opportunity for Kyle. And as we move over to the space of what's next, the reports are he is taking Jay Hill from BYU, that he wants Jason Beck from Utah. And I'll just kind of bottom line this before we get to a break. Whoever he wants, he's probably going to get. Is there some sort of vindictive side to Kyle? I don't know. Is it out of the realm of possibility that if he felt disrespected by Utah and suddenly he has the Michigan job with a bankroll as long as he wants? I mean, Michigan has a $20 billion endowment. Okay, the Big Ten consummated a private equity deal, and Michigan and USC said no because they don't need it, because they have the cash and they've got a grip of it. So is it out of the realm of possibility that with this bankroll Kyle has, he looks at both Utah and BYU and says, yep, I'm coming for all of it. I want the house. I want the kids. I want the car. Good luck with your apartment downtown, but this is a divorce, and I'm taking all of it. We'll have to see, but I do believe whoever he wants, he's probably going to get. We'll continue to talk about this, though. Sean and I, during Crosstalk, we're talking about, I mean, look, in my opinion, quality of life does not have a price tag. I know a lot of very miserable people with money. It does not buy happiness. It buys security. Right? I mean, it alleviates a lot of worries. There's no doubt about that. And if it's generational wealth, you get it. But do you really want to sacrifice something you love as far as where you live? And if your wife and kids are happy for an extra $1 million, I don't think you do. But that's just me. And those are some of the decisions that Jay Hill, Jason Beck, Sharif Shah, Lewis Powell, whoever else, these are the processes they're going to have to go through for themselves. But bottom line is 2 things can be true. I'm really happy for Kyle. I'm excited to see if his proof of concept can play out on a national scale. In 48 hours, Kyle Whittingham became a national figure in a way that he didn't become in 21 years here. That's the power of the University of Michigan. And this also could be a good thing for Utah because I think Morgan's ready. All right, we'll catch our first break of this Monday show. Coming up on the other side, we'll bring in Scott Mitchell. Then it's Bill Bush, Kyle Bonneger, and Tony Parks. We got a busy Monday show. And it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. we do not have Monday Night Football on this radio station tonight. My bad. The Utah men's basketball team is in action, taking on Washington. But Monday Night Football will wrap up your week in the NFL. A chaotic week in the NFL. Still a couple of playoff spots up for grabs, and we're going to have to wait until next week. Porter, are you a Saturday Night Live guy?
That's a tough question because I kind of grew up on it, but I grew up on Chris Farley and Tina Fey and Will Ferrell and like late 90s. So much so that I had like the DVD set, and I've watched those DVD sets of the best of Chris Farley more than I've watched any new episode. But I do catch up on them like digitally, the stuff that's good enough to make it to socials. I usually see those.
Have you ever seen Norm Macdonald's impersonation of Burt Reynolds on Celebrity Jeopardy?
Yes.
Well, I bring it up because I was looking at some Monday Night Football stuff, and the Rams' third-string tight end is a guy named Terrence Ferguson, but it just said T. Ferguson, and the first thing that came to my mind is Turd Ferguson, the nickname. Anyway, that's a reference for you Gen Xers that actually still watch SNL. Is Scott Mitchell a Gen Xer? Are you a Gen Xer, Scotty, and also do you watch SNL?
Yes, I'm a Gen Xer, I believe, and I really don't watch SNL. I'm kind of like Porter. I'll watch old clips. You know, I'm kind of a fan of YouTube, and I get lost in YouTube like every day, and so I'll go down a rabbit hole with old SNL stuff. And like I'll tell you what's good. Like when Nate Bargatze gets on and does the George Washington thing, that's funny, right? He's funny, but most of it, I'm really not into political, you know, just be funny. Don't take a stance anywhere. I want you to entertain me. I don't want you to politicize me. So I'm kind of out of it a little bit.
For all you kids that are confused, just Google search Celebrity Jeopardy, Burt Reynolds, Turd Ferguson, and that's the clip I'm referencing on the show. All right, moving on. Scott, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's been kind of a busy news cycle, both locally and nationally over the past 4 or 5 days. So let's just start with just like a big picture overview question. How have you kind of consumed and digested this storyline that has landed Kyle Whittingham in Ann Arbor?
First off, I just want to give you a shout out. You guys did an awesome job on Friday. You know, it's a vacation day, and it was a great move, and you really nailed it. So,
thank you.
Kudos to you. That was excellent. You know, as I've wrapped my brain around this, and I've been consumed with it. I think I've watched every possible news outlet, podcast from Utah to the Big 12 to Michigan, and really. The one thing that jumps out at me more than anything is timing, and how timing is just everything in life so much of the time. And it's no one's fault. You know, we all knew that Coach Whittingham was eventually going to retire. They've already had a coach waiting, and he's been waiting. And I think the university has been waiting as well. And I think you know, Kyle has been open and honest about, look, I'm not going to be like my dad. I'm not going to be like Lavelle. I'm not going to coach forever. And I think he put a date of 65, and he's 66 now. So, you know, it's how far past his shelf life is it safe to consume Kyle Whittingham? You know, is it a year? Is it 6 months? I don't know. But so I don't look at this as nefarious. You know, some people are like, oh, you know, Mark Harlan, you know, it wasn't a bad move. It was a move that they're looking for the future. They're looking for what's in the best long-term interest of Utah football, and that best interest was the trust they put into Morgan Scalley. But the timing was impeccable, and it was just the right thing. And you'd have to be dumb, illiterate, deaf, mute not to go to Michigan. I mean, if Kyle Whittingham had that, he's got to do that. There's just no way around it. I don't care. Any coach in the world that would have that opportunity would have to take it. You could hear it in his voice, the excitement about being at Michigan. And so I just really wrap my arms more around the timing of it and the opportunity. And I just, you know, I really am excited for Kyle Whittingham, but on the other side of it, Morgan's ready. You know, I think if anyone's ready for this, and it'll be exciting to see the adjustments and how they've got to shuffle around players and coaching staffs and all that, but they'll figure that out. They do that all the time. And quite frankly, it's probably good for Morgan to have to do that, because that's what you do as a head coach is you pick the staff. You get to pick your coaching team, and I'm sure Morgan wants his own team. He wants his own identity, and so this is a great opportunity for him to say, who are my guys and who do I want to be a part of this coaching staff here? And so I think it's a good break in a lot of ways. It might be a better thing for Morgan in the long run to kind of have his old staff as his own staff as opposed to maybe, some guys that maybe are super loyal to Kyle. Who knows? But I just think it's a good break and a good situation for all parties involved.
So one of kind of the litmus tests I use to try to understand when a story is a lot bigger than maybe we understand in our little sports talk radio bubble is, am I contacted by people that want me to be on the news? Am I contacted by people that are outside of our market that want to do interviews? Like, what's the pull from the newsroom instead of just, the sports section? Like, if a big-time story makes its way to CNN or Fox, it's different than just making its way to ESPN. And I've done, I think, 4 different radio hits over the course of the past 4 or 5 days, and then we played a bunch of stuff on the news. So this is a really, really big story. And the one common question I've been asked, Scott, that people want to know more than anything else is what the hell happened here? How did this go down behind the scenes? I've already given the listeners for the opening segment what I believe to be the truth, and I completely understand if there are things that you have to keep under wraps. So you do whatever you got to do, but what's your understanding of how we actually got here?
Well, and again, I'm speculating, and so I don't know. I mean, I kind of have an idea, but it's my opinion more than anything. I think it was so much about where is the best break for this to happen. And I think the school's been looking at this for maybe even last year, maybe even before last year, going, okay, this is Kyle's last year, what does that look for us moving forward? Because you got to plan for this stuff. And, I don't think it's a knee-jerk reaction, or I don't think it's anything that is, last minute. And so I'm sure this has been on the mind as they've been planning the future of things. And I really believe that with the fund that they have, the private equity fund, with Morgan maybe getting antsy a little bit and just going, hey, you said this, and maybe there were promises, maybe there were understandings, maybe there were a lot of things that were said or promised, and so it could be people holding people accountable to that, or who knows. But I think it's like, how long are we going to go with this? Because I think the longer we wait, the worse this situation potentially could be. And I think it could get really awkward having the coach in waiting who's been waiting like way too long, and then and the school's trying to move, everyone's trying to move on, and so but I also think there's a tremendous respect for Kyle. I mean, I've said this, and I'll say this till I die. I think he's done the best coaching job in the country in the last 20, 25 years, with doing so much more with so much less, and climbing such a mountain. I mean, they went from a Mountain West team to a Pac-12 team to 2 Rose Bowls and 2 Pac-12 championships. That's tremendous. And not only that, he was tremendous when he was at Utah and going to the Sugar Bowl. And I mean, like, he's succeeded all the way along. So clearly he's a really good coach. But every good coach, every situation has a shelf life. And I just really think they felt this is the perfect time to have it happen. Nobody could have foreseen that Michigan was going to open up, and nobody. And so it's just about the time, just the unbelievable timing and really luck of the situation that ended Kyle at Michigan. Kyle did not think about Michigan when he stepped down. He probably was like, okay, let's just take some time and look around and see what's going on, and because he was not the coach when Michigan started. There were 3 or 4 guys that were way ahead of Kyle Whittingham, and it just worked out that way. So I don't think you can blame anyone for this. I just think it was just unbelievable fortune and luck that and timing that ended up this situation. I really don't fault Mark Harlan for what he did. I think everyone, we all knew this was going to happen, and it's just when it's going to happen. And I don't think there was a lot of nefarious of it. Look, Kyle clearly is a coach, and he doesn't know any better. He just wants to be a coach. He can't get it out of his system, and he says he wants to quit. We'll see what happens at Michigan and where he goes with that. If it's 5 years or maybe it's more, because Kyle is a very healthy young 66, so he could coach for a long time. But I wouldn't get too caught in the weeds with what the heck happened. We all knew Kyle was going to step down at some point. This just happened to be the time.
I do think, and I wonder, and we'll get it at some point, because as you know, you're one of these people. The Fourth Estate is the last branch you guys latch on to when it like when you're done playing, when you're done coaching. If you don't want to write a book, you want to do TV or radio because it kind of keeps you close to it. And we are the last rung. Okay, now you've joined us in the other side of the dirty media space of the business. And I do think at some point Kyle will talk in a more honest way about how exactly this all went down and what happened. I do think there's something here with some of the boosters that felt like it was time. I don't think we're going to uncover anything that's completely nefarious, and I don't think we're going to uncover anything that is, somewhat shocking. But it is the thing that most people are curious about. Even a lot of Michigan fans are like, well, wait a second. 21 years, won like almost 70% of his games, legend, clearly gas left in the tank. Like, how do you let this guy step down if he still wants to coach? I do think that's a portion of this story, Scott, that people are just always going to be curious about until we actually get the truth.
I don't think there's any question about that. And, time will tell, like, if it was a good or bad thing. If he does well there, people are going to go, man, that was a blown opportunity. Maybe we didn't realize how much Kyle had left in the tank, or maybe we didn't realize how good he was, or maybe it goes the opposite direction. Morgan Scalley's phenomenal. Michigan's okay. And they go, whew, that was a smart, the only way you can really tell about these kind of moves is down the road. And that's why, I just think it's hard to be an athletic director, and you got to make some tough decisions. I talked to Chris Hill many years ago, and I was like, boy, you made some shrewd moves with some coaches. You got Mack in here. That was a great move. You got Urban Meyer, which was a great move. You got Majerus. Those were some really good coaches that you were able to hire, and you let go of Majerus, and probably at the right time. And and Coach Mack kind of, maybe he lived out his shelf life, or at least he maximized what he was, he could do with the program. And finding Urban was remarkable because he was an incredible coach, and he's a Hall of Fame coach. I mean, Coach Whittingham's a Hall of Fame. I mean, all three of them you could argue could be Hall of Fame type coaches, but it's hard, and it's hard to make those decisions. But you got to make them, and you got to make it work with the decisions you make. You got to believe into it, and I think that's what that at least to me, the university is saying we have a plan. You may not like our plan, you may not agree with it, but it's our plan, and we're progressively going out there and doing things, and not sitting on our hands and realizing we've got to be able to figure out how to play in this new world of college football. And I don't fault them at all for what they've done. If you're a head coach, Spence, you stay somewhere long enough, you're gonna really tick some people off. And in the world of college athletics, where athletic departments are constantly fundraising, and they're fundraising through donors, then the donors are going to get their ear, and that's how it's always been, and probably how it'll always be. And so they have influence. And I know people that love Kyle Whittingham, massively loyal to him, and I know people that aren't. And I'm sure those discussions went on, and maybe the ones that aren't, won out. I don't know, but that's just normal. That's how college football is. And maybe we'll know someday, and maybe we won't. I don't know, but there's certainly a lot more that goes into something like this. And I just felt it was time to step down. I mean, I think everyone with half a brain can see that and realize that, and we don't need to know.
Porter, this is the portion of the program where I invite you on air to remind Scott Mitchell of the golden rule, which we adhere to on the drive.
Yeah, the man with the gold usually makes the rules.
Not usually. He always makes the rules. The man with the gold makes the rules. So if because to your point, ultimately maybe Witt lost support from certain people. And look, I hate to be cynical, but we live in the United States of America. We are a capitalist society. So when you follow the money, you typically find your answer. So I just wanted to underscore your point about Harlan. Because, look, I can't speak to whether or not Mark and Kyle liked each other. I can't speak to whether or not Mark has lost support up there or what. I have zero frame of reference. Mark joins the show when he can. When I see him off air, he shakes my hand and we talk it like that's the extent of the relationship. But just to underscore your point because I think Mark is wearing this a little bit where people believe he handled this poorly. I'm going to put you in Mark's seat, Scott. Okay. You're in Mark Harlan's seat. If you receive multiple phone calls from big money people, big money boosters whose, I don't know, names might be on stadiums and arenas up on campus, and they say to you, if you bring him back, I am not writing your check this year, your hands are tied. You have no other choice. So I know that Mark is wearing this for some people. They're killing him online. They believe that he did a legend dirty. But what would you do if you're in Mark's seat, if your big money people wanted this change? You cannot lose the big money people in today's day and age of college football.
Well, I think it's tough to start with, and like I said, I think these athletic directors are in a tough position. This is a tough thing when you have a legendary coach, but that's how you make your living. I mean, you're the athletic director to direct things, and you have to have a plan, you have to have a vision, you have to have a direction, and it feels like that's what they have. I don't know that there's a better prepared coach to be Utah's football coach than Morgan Scalley. I think that this becomes a really good decision if Utah can find NIL funding and not just the $16 million that they get from this revenue sharing, but more. If you're going to compete with the big boys, you got to be in the 26 to 30 over $30 million range. Or you're not going to compete on the national stage. And I think Utah's trying to get to that. And so if they can do that, it's going to be a brilliant decision because it's all about the players. You hear every coach, even Kyle Whittingham, it's all about the players and getting the right players in here. Now, from my perspective, I don't know what it's like to go in and have to answer to donors because I look at this strictly from a football perspective. And I've said that, I believe I even said it on your show. Imagine what, if I didn't, I've said it publicly, and I'll say it right now, I don't care. If Kyle Whittingham has done more with less, imagine what he would do if he got more. I think it would be lightning in a bottle. I think Kyle Whittingham, could be super explosive here at Utah. And my thought is, don't we want to at least see what that looks like? I mean, and maybe Utah doesn't feel that it can get to that higher, number as far as NIL money, and they're just kind of stuck in the world they are in, and they got to make the most of where they are. And the team will probably be similar to how it's been the last couple of years, where it's competitive. It's got to overachieve. It's got to have every perfect thing happen in order for it to succeed. You can't have turnovers. You got to find ways to win those close games. You got to, it has to be dead perfect or you're not going to win, and you're going to be just competitive with everyone else as opposed to setting yourself apart. And I just would be curious to see what Kyle Whittingham could do at Utah with all the resources that these other programs have. Now, I don't know. Now we're going to find out because he's there. I mean, he's at a program. And does he have all of the resources? And if he doesn't, succeed at it, then you go, well, then maybe he wasn't as great a coach as we all thought. I don't know. But I whatever it is, I think it's really, really tough for these athletic directors. You have a plan, you make a move, and I unfortunately think that has to involve donors.
Now, you made this point earlier, and I want to underscore it. There just was simply no way that anyone, whether it's boosters, donors, Mark Harlan, Morgan Scalley, there's no way anybody knew that Michigan was going to come open and then Kyle was going to get that job. And I don't want to paint Kyle as a scorned ex-spouse, but there has to be a little bit of anxious energy up on the Hill that now that your ex is coming to the proceedings with a very powerful attorney and is much richer than you, that there's a chance that your ex is going to be like, yeah, I'll take the house, I'll take the kids, I'll take the car. Oh, and you know what? I'm taking the dog just because I can. Like that to me is where we're at as far as the worried nature of both BYU and Utah fans. So what we know is that it appears that Jay Hill is joining him. What we know is it appears that Kyle wants Jason to join him. My question to you is, when the dust settles, who do you think follows Kyle to Ann Arbor?
Well, if you listen to Kyle, he said, I'm going to bring 7 people in that I know, and I'm going to keep 3 people that I don't. So somewhere in that equation are 7 coaches. I mean that's what he said, and so he kind of told you what he was going to do. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, although I think you left out the vacation house.
Fair enough.
Also wanted the vacation house.
Scott, he wants the frequent flyer miles, okay? He's coming for all of it. Let's be clear.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And for this reason. In the coaching ranks, you surround yourself with people that are loyal and trust you, because you are on an island and it all falls on you. And Kyle knows this, and he knows I got to have people I know I can count on to get the job done, to get these players ready, and to coach them up right. And I know that. And Kyle is very savvy about what it takes to succeed. So there are guys he's hired and have been with him for a long time. The Lewis Powells, the Jim Hardings. Now, Jason's new, but Jason, I know, has Kyle's trust. I know Kyle thinks extremely highly of Jason Beck. And I know Kyle thought he probably wouldn't be able to keep him here if he was still at Utah. That's how highly he believes Jason Beck is regarded. So you want to surround yourself with all those good people. And I don't think that's bad for Morgan either. I think Morgan needs to go out, and it's part of being a head coach. You're going to have turnover. You're going to have to go out and recruit coaches. You're going to have to find guys that really fit you and you can trust and are going to get that job done. Kyle's had a ton of offensive coordinators during his time at Utah, and he's not been afraid to make a change. And Morgan's that's probably one of the biggest challenges I think Morgan's going to face is where do I find these coaches, and how do I find coaches that buy into my program and my culture? And I think it's a good split to say, hey, I'm going to go out and find them. And it's not like it's hard to find. These coaches have a coaches association. All the coaches have agents. There's a ton of talk. A coach is always wanting to look to move up or move to a better situation. And maybe Jim Harding doesn't leave because maybe he's the offensive coordinator now at Utah. Or maybe Morgan just goes, I want to clean house with a lot of guys, and I'm going to go in a different direction. And I guarantee you that Morgan Scalley has not been sitting on his behind since he's been the coach in waiting. I'm sure he's thought through all the possible scenarios of, hey, what does my staff look like? Who are guys that I want to see if I can go after and get here? And if he hasn't thought of these things, he's a fool, which I know Morgan's not. I know he's extremely thorough in everything that he does, and picking a staff is a big priority to him as well. And so, I'm sure the dust will settle. It doesn't offend me. I'm not hurt by if there's a change in these coaching staffs. The same thing with Jay Hill at BYU. Gary Anderson's an analyst down at BYU. Gary Anderson was and Kalani have a long relationship. Gary Anderson was a defensive coordinator at Utah. So there are replacements. Everyone's replaceable. That's for sure. But I'm just not caught up in. I don't think this is as big a deal about staff changing as maybe some people think that it is.
Well, as you said earlier, only time will tell. If Witt wins a Big Ten championship and goes to the CFP and Morgan wins 5 games, people are going to have a lot of questions, but we'll have to wait to see how that goes down. Scott, appreciate the time. Safe travels to Vegas, and we'll chat soon, okay?
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Spence.
Scott Mitchell, former Utah quarterback. He'll be on our call for the Vegas Bowl. That's right. Utah actually still has a football game to play, taking on Nebraska. We'll preview that game coming up because Bill Bush, good friend of the show, I was on his radio program this morning. He's going to stop by, and he's located in Lincoln. We'll kind of give a preview of the Vegas Bowl coming up with Bill. But before we catch a break, my good friends at Burt Brothers right now save up to $110 on Firestone tires or up to $120 on Bridgestone tires. It's the perfect time to replace worn tires and head into the new year with confidence. But hurry, these end of the year deals will not last long. With over 30 years of experience in nearly 30 locations, Burt Brothers ASE certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every location. They stand behind their products and services with industry-leading warranties and low-price tire guarantees. One-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance, from tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, now offering value tire options such as Americus and Summit tires starting at just $69 and warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by a Burt Brothers or Tire Busters location or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. It's our good friends at Burt Brothers, burtbrothers.com. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Coach Bill Bush joins us coming up on the other side of a quick break on a Monday Drive on ESPN 700. All right, Kyle Bonagura from ESPN is going to join us coming up, as will Tony Parks. So we've got a busy 4 o'clock hour of the radio show. Porter, you've been producing this radio program for, 4 or 5 years now. You're well aware that I am definitely not a morning person, correct?
This is fair.
Yeah,
this is true.
I don't wake up at 6:30 for anything. I don't wake up before 7:30 or 8 almost ever. But our next guest is one of the reasons why I will be up bright and early, as I laid in bed and did a very fun radio hit with Bill Bush, who joins us now on a Monday. Bill, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm doing great. And we had like the Paul Feinbaum of radio from Utah on 93.7 The Ticket on early break this morning, and it was phenomenal. Our numbers were ridiculous from listening to Spencer, and just appreciate it so much. And it was. I mean, when you get to, you're talking Mountain Time, and when you do an early the drive show from 6 to 9, and you're trying to get somebody on from Mountain Time, that usually doesn't go well for the Mountain Time people. So we're much in depth. Thank you so much. It was awesome.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and you've been so good to join us so often. I definitely wanted to step up. And, ultimately, there's a reason I do afternoon drive radio, morning time. I'm a night owl, period, Bill. That's just kind of how I roll. Now, you obviously are not, because you do morning radio, but can you relate to just kind of grinding on the late night hours?
Oh, I was such a late night person my whole life, and then recruiting always kind of did that to me, and the profession did. You worked a lot of late nights, but prior to that, I loved being up until 1 a.m. I did that one. That was my deal, and so the late night person, big fan of you. I also the interview, we had so much stuff to talk about that I was so taken back, and I didn't get a chance to act on this. When you said that your dad basically ran Madison Square Garden, you said that today. Is that accurate? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, he was the CEO of MSG for 10 years, and it's been interesting for me to watch because they're close to the same age. They actually were at BYU, pretty close to each other. And, I've watched my dad kind of debate whether or not it's time for him to end his career, and then to watch Kyle kind of debate the same thing. It's just been kind of an interesting thing to witness from my seat.
I just couldn't imagine that. I mean, Madison Square Garden. So that's why I didn't go off the rails today, because we would have spent the entire show talking about that, and then not about, I said today. I've never heard. You guys are in Xanadu right now. Your storylines are unbelievable. You have your head coach that has been forever at the Utes is now the head coach of Michigan, and you also have a bowl game, and you have a new head coach at Utah. And that all just happened within days. So I can't imagine what you guys got going on there.
Yeah, it's been fun. Because I think there are a lot of interesting angles, and I actually think there's a way that this ends well for Utah, and I think there's a way that this ends very well for Kyle. But, of course, you're the one that has been in the coaching profession, and you are friends with Kyle. He went on your radio show. We'll kind of kick a couple of things back and forth, a lot of the stuff we talked about on your show this morning. But what has this storyline, Bill, been like for you to digest that ends with Kyle in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, just remarkable. Like I said, I had a conversation with Kyle probably a day or two before that he announced that he was stepping down at Utah, and that we talked for a long time, and there was no indications during that time, not that I felt that he should probably say something to me at all, but I didn't feel that was what was going to happen there, but I was kind of on lines with you that probably this was the time he was going to step down, so I wasn't shocked at that. And then to have a chance, the level of microscope that there is at the University of Michigan is ridiculous. It's a Notre Dame-ish. Obviously, I was in the SEC at LSU, where the scope is incredible, but this focus, what Kyle has stepped into, is an unbelievable, like I said, just unbelievable fishbowl that he is in, and also the best possible hire that Michigan could make with everything that's been going on.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, it's interesting to consider what the Michigan job actually is, Bill, because in 48 hours, Kyle has kind of become a national name in a way that he almost never was in 21 years here. So as somebody that's in the profession, I want you to elaborate, help us really understand just the magnitude of what the Michigan job entails, and then your thoughts on the Kyle Whittingham way translating from Salt Lake to Ann Arbor.
Well, a couple things. One, I believe currently and in the past that he's gotten himself now into the number one football rivalry in college football. I don't think anything really. There's a bunch of great ones, and there's Texas and Texas A&M, which has been rekindled. But the Ohio State Michigan game is so huge. And then obviously with the past of Michigan and Harbaugh winning the national championship recently and winning those games in a row against Ohio State, I believe has just made this. It has made it the magnitude even bigger. But there is such a scope from a long ways out of just when you just say Michigan, you hear their fight song. When you know that I still believe they're number one in total number of wins in the history of college football. They play in a stadium that has 105,000 people. It's called the Big House. That basically wraps everything up right there. The scrutiny is large, and also everything about that you are doing now has become larger. And also, you are 100% accurate that Kyle was so well known amongst his peers and amongst the coaches, and then somewhat a sidebar maybe by all of the fans that were they're Penn State fans or fans that were Ohio State fans. Didn't know much about Kyle, that a very good coach from Utah. Now they know everything about it.
So when it comes to, when you had a front row seat here, the way Kyle has been able to build success here in Salt Lake, it's such a unique place, Bill, as you know. And for our listeners, Bill was on the staff. And a lot of people credit Bill for recruiting Alex Smith. And so, Urban, Kyle, you were kind of in the mix there. But so you understand how unique our market is, and you understand the way Kyle has gone about his business to recruit at a high level, win at a high level. Does proof of concept in Salt Lake make you confident that we'll see proof of concept in Ann Arbor?
Number one thing is, I've always said this in recruiting. If you can connect, you can connect. I don't want to hear that I'm 22 years old or I'm 64 years old or whatever it is. You just have those abilities. And coaching is the same thing, and also the same thing as a leader of men. So there's just certain people that just have that trait to be a leader of men when they're young, and then middle age, whatever age it is, they have that ability to command the room. And I said this about Kyle that rarely happens. That he is one of the most connected with his players that I've ever been around, and he's also the smartest man in the room. And a lot of times, both those things don't always add up together. Sometimes you'll be known as that guy's a great recruiter, but he's a limited football coach. He's a limited football coach, unbelievable recruiter. He can really connect with his team, but he doesn't have some of the clock management stuff down. He can really do this, but he can't do this. That's where the magic kind of works with Kyle. Is he is at the highest level at all those, and so that's rare that you have somebody that can command a room, has the details of how to run a football program, that also has the public relations skills and the ability to command a team. And so that will go really well for him, and his style fits. A lot of times you'll hear somebody say that, the league is going to have to adjust to us, how we do things. Well, Kyle's plan on being on physicality and upfront line of scrimmage football and run the football, that's what Michigan does, and that's what Kyle believes in. So they're not trying to change something. Everything adds up and fits very well.
A lot of people, and of course we discussed this on your show as well, because a lot of people just continue to be very, very curious about how this all went down behind the scenes. And one of the things that Michigan fans have been asking is, wait a second, like a lot of Michigan fans had maybe just heard of Kyle, but didn't fully understand really the success he had here. And so one of the things you see all over the place is, well, wait a second, if he won nearly 70% of his games and won Pac-12 championships and had undefeated seasons, why isn't he doing what he's doing now for us, for Utah? Why isn't he continuing to coach the program he very much built and helped build up brick by brick? And ultimately, when it comes to the how, I think where we find ourselves now is there's no way anybody could have predicted Kyle was going to land the Michigan job, right? And so now that that's happened, we were talking about this last segment, the worry, Bill, in the market is that, and I hate to kind of paint Kyle as a scorned spouse, but He is the ex-spouse that now has deep pockets with a better lawyer, and he's coming to your he's coming to your meeting to let you know that he's going to take the house, he's going to take the kids, he's going to take the car, he's going to take the dog, and he'll take the frequent flyer miles while he's at it. So what are you hearing about? Kyle himself said he's going to bring 7 to 8 coaches that he knows. We're hearing that Jay Hill is one of them. We're hearing that he would like Jason Beck, but you're in this community, in the coaching circle. What are you hearing about who may follow Kyle to Ann Arbor?
Well, 2 things with that. One, I don't know. I've not heard anything. We've just exchanged, texts of, of me just being complimentary of him receiving the, be able to pick up to get the job. I'm sorry, I can kind of stammer around here. For him getting the job, and then that was all we really had talked about. So I have no idea what exactly is happening. What I would say is this: is never. It's like recruiting. Never worry about who you lost. Always worry about who you get. And I'd say the same thing for the Utes. If someone does depart the program and goes with him, or a player goes into the portal, I wouldn't spend any time on it. And I sure don't think that in the way the world is today, that is not being in college football. That is not being a bad person. If a couple of guys decide to go with him, or whoever he chooses to have go with him, and some decide to stay, some will probably have options and choose to stay at Utah or at BYU. So I wouldn't get too tied up in that. And if a couple of players go for some reason, I wouldn't get too worried about that. I don't see that as JMU. You don't hear that like what just happened. I mean, when Cignetti took some players with him to turn things around in year 1, now a lot of those players are still on his roster, and they're the number 1 team, in the country right now. And some of those players left, and no one's really saying a whole lot about that. So I wouldn't, if I were a fan base, I would just be worried about who do we have to get next? What's our next way to build our best product, our best coaching staff, and get our team organized? And I wouldn't be upset with, but I do not see Kyle at all being like, I'm scorned, so I'm gonna wreck shop. And no, there might be a couple of people that maybe they've had conversations forever. They might end up coaching together at some point in time. So that'd be my take on that.
So moving over to Morgan, I kind of feel bad for my friend. I mean, I've known Morgan 25 years, and the microscope, the lens he's going to be under now, Bill, is just a little bit different because if Kyle goes to Michigan, competes and maybe wins a Big Ten championship, and goes to the college football playoff, and he's joined by a bunch of coaches Morgan thought he was going to have on staff, and Morgan takes a minute to kind of get going. And, I just feel bad for the heat he's going to take. That's part of the deal, though, if you're a head coach in P4 football. But Morgan, he played for you. Tell us what you believe as far as Morgan being up to this task.
Well, I believe he's more than up to the task for the amount of time spent. I'll just go back to the person that I coached. Obviously when I was able to convince Morgan to change positions from running back over to safety, and was able to get it to have him make that change and be an incredible player. And that was because of his not just his ability. It was more about his tenacity. I mean, he was just so competitive. So, and that competitive spirit is where people fail a lot. So Morgan's competitive spirit will allow him to put together a staff, have a vision. He's also seen it from a lot of different angles. He's seen it from, I said he's been on that staff for so long with Kyle to see it. He's able to watch programs from afar, do a great job. So he understands Utah better probably than anyone that could take this over. And no matter what, when a legend leads, it's hard. So when you hear that a lot, you don't want to follow the man, right? That's a common statement of how hard it is to follow someone that has had such a run of success like Kyle has. But there's no one better equipped. Anyone else would be lesser equipped. So what Utah got was they've got the best version, and I wouldn't call it a plan B. They just have the best version of the next phase that they could possibly get.
Also wanted you to chime in on a topic we were discussing earlier, because look, I don't think anybody would debate, like, if you have a chance to make generational wealth, maybe you suck it up and move to a place you don't love for 6-7 years and stack cash so your kids and grandkids never have to worry about finances. But when it comes to quality of life, like, you probably have this experience too. I know a lot of people with money that just aren't very happy. I know a lot of rich people that don't seem to enjoy their day-to-day existence. So when it comes to the decision-making process these coaches are about to go through or have already gone through, there's nothing Utah can bring to the table that Michigan cannot. There just isn't. Michigan has more money. It's one of the top maybe 3 to 5 jobs in college football. So when it comes to the resources Michigan has, Utah cannot keep up with that. But when it comes to whether or not your wife and kids are happy or you enjoy where you live, is $1 million really worth it if you have to uproot your entire family and you take the risk of maybe diminishing your quality of life? You're a coach that's moved around. Give me your thoughts on that, Bill.
Well, the quality of life is fun. I mean, I've had some places I was at that were just, I'm like, wow, this was so great to live here and have different. And I've been lucky. I bounced around a little bit. That was one of the things that was, where Kyle's been at Utah for so long. What a great story. And I envy that story. I also like some things that happened with me because I lived in a lot of different communities that I never would have lived in my life. So I thought that was kind of fun. But these coaches, that's not what makes them go. And people used to always say a year or two ago, like even you heard it even this year, I just back up the Brinks truck for Saban and offer him $25 million a year at that to 25. That's not what makes them tick. It's not that money. Right now, we'd all agree that Kyle could retire very comfortably, right? I don't know how he'd probably spend all of his money. It would be ridiculous what he'd have to spend today to do that. But what makes him tick is running a football team and on 3rd and 8s. And how do I go to Ohio State and win this game? Can I be measured up in this big stage of what this is like? All those things that come up, that's what makes these coaches tick, and that's what makes Kyle tick. And I'm sure it's like because right now he's age 66, and it'd be easy to say he likes to ski, I like to play golf, I like to do a couple things. What he really likes to do is to run a football team, and so that part right there. So no matter where you go, you'll be very happy if you're doing that, because sometimes when you're not doing that, it's miserable. When you're like, man, I'm out fishing or I'm golfing more like that, and then all of a sudden you're like, I want to try to run a football team. That's what I do, and that's all Kyle's done. And so I think that's probably one of the big things here is that he's doing what this is retirement at its highest level, meaning that they always say, I want to do what I really want to do the most of my life right now. Well, that's what he's doing. He gets to do what he loves to do every single day. Now he's just doing it at Michigan.
All right, Bill, as you know, there's actually more football left to play for the Utes, as the Vegas Bowl will be on New Year's Eve, and we are the home of the Utes. We're going to have that game on our station. As we discussed on your show, Utah has some very key opt-outs, namely along the offensive line, when it comes to Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano. Spencer's brother will also not play. And then we're awaiting word on maybe a couple of other opt-outs. Utah's a pretty healthy favorite. But tell us about Nebraska. Let's get a little scouting report. Who will they be without, and what do we need to know about this version of the Cornhuskers?
Sure. I'm not an insider, obviously, like you are, but I am right here in Lincoln, so I do follow them closely. I don't go to practice like Steve Sipple, who's on the radio with me. He's down in Vegas with them right now and goes to practice and does all those things. So I get a lot of insight, and I have coached there at 3 different times, so it's something I follow close. The interesting part is going to be obviously that they have a true freshman quarterback playing, who played very well against UCLA, did not play well against Penn State or against Iowa. Maybe could have been something. No, he's from Southern California. Was the weather a factor? I don't know. So he's healthy, can run very well, very athletic, and now he's playing in a dome stadium, and so that has to be a big positive. Their running back, Emmett Johnson, who was a first or second team All-American on everyone's ballot, is opting out. And he got a lot of yards that he wasn't designed to get, meaning that if it was blocked for 4, he got 8. And so that was something. I know that Utah has struggled mightily in the rush defense. So that was kind of a trade out there. So it seems to be pretty even with the opt-outs on both sides. I would say that Utah got hit harder. When you take 2 potential first-round draft picks out, that is a big deal. So I think that hits a little bit harder. You will see a very invested team to play hard, Nebraska will, and you're also going to see a fan base who will really be into it. You'll probably have 25,000 fans there from Nebraska because there's so many Nebraska fans that live in California, Southern California, and live in Arizona by the thousands. And so they can drive to the game. And so they're expecting a huge crowd to show up there. So there'll be a very spirited atmosphere inside that building with the Utah fans. So that's what you'll see. They've struggled on defense up front on the defensive line, which would have been quite a great matchup for Utah prior to the opt-out. So that will be interesting to follow. But you're going to see a very hungry game on both parts, I believe, and we'll see how this plays out. But I don't see how the numbers are that mightily. I would see it more as about a 4.5 to 5.5 Utah instead of being double digits, I believe. But I can see why Utah is favored, and that's what we talked about on your show was where is Utah fans and where is that team at?
Yeah, and that's what's going to be interesting as far as, Morgan's first time at the helm, all of the potential off-field distractions getting in the way. Before I set you loose, though, you asked me this question about Utah fans today, so I'm going to kind of turn it around. I know that there are a lot of Ute fans that had planned to make this trip just to say thank you to Kyle. We didn't have that opportunity during his final home game here because we didn't know if that was it. But Utah played K-State. It was a hell of a game. It went down to the wire. And, no one really knew if this was it for Kyle, so he didn't really get a send-off. He's not going to be there, obviously, so this fan base will never have the opportunity to say thank you. I doubt people are canceling their plans for that, though. Some of these bowl games, the attendance has been horrible. BYU Georgia Tech was good because BYU fans travel, but what sort of Nebraska contingent are we expecting in Las Vegas?
Yeah, it'll be very good. Like I said, they'll be nice. They're so easy. There's a lot that are flying out. First of all, it's Vegas, and so it's a natural. So anything from Nebraska, there's about 4 to 6 direct flights to Vegas a day. And so very easy to get out to in and out. And again, locally from Arizona and California, there'll be a large contingent. They had 30,000 fans when Nebraska played at UCLA earlier this season. And so with that earlier this season, that group of fans that they will be at this bowl game. They will be a very invested. They travel very well. You got to remember, Nebraska went somewhere around the number of 8 years without going to a bowl game. So their money is built up. Last year they went to the Pinstripe Bowl. So this, for the Nebraska fans, in the last 10 years is the best bowl game they've been to. And so it's like, hey, we can go to Vegas. We can go to an indoor stadium. The game's over at 4. We get to do something else that night. And they'll have a blast. And so there's going to be a large group of fans that are very much into this game, and I think for that, it's going to be a lot of fun. And also with that, kids are kids, and kids like to play football, and all the stuff that we talk about and get caught up in, and coaches and all these different things, they really don't care that much about. They really don't. They just kind of move on. And so this is a great job for Morgan Scalley to be like, all right, this is what we're doing. We're going to go play football, and get them to go play football, and they will play. So I'm excited to see this effort on this field.
Bill, thank you, sir. Thanks again for having me on your show this morning, and I appreciate the time. Enjoy the week, and Happy New Year to you and yours, okay?
Happy New Year. And like I said, this doesn't add up. My level coming on your and your level coming on our show, it was ridiculous. There's still people talking about it. If you could just somehow do my show live every day in place of me. That's how good Spencer was today. So you get a chance, go back and listen to it. It was awesome. Thank you guys so much.
You're too kind. Coach Bill Bush, national champ Coach Bill Bush down at LSU. He coached with Urban and Kyle here in Salt Lake City. And, yes, I did wake up way earlier than I typically do to do a radio hit. Just to give you a visual, is he still on the phone? Because I don't want him to know this.
No.
I forgot about it. And luckily, at about 6:45, the old man thing kicked in where you'll see down the road, you're still young, but as you age, when it's time to go, it's time to go.
Yeah.
All right? And your body's like, dude, I know you're tired. I know you're sleeping, but you got to get up and do the thing. 6:45, and I look down, and I have a text from his producer like, hey, we'll call you in about 20, 25 minutes. I was like,
oh yeah.
So laying in bed, in the dark, AirPods in, did the hit from bed, and it went well.
What if you could do all of your radio like that.
No. See, there have been a couple of moments in my career where I've had program directors be like, hey, we're considering you for morning drive. And I'm like, well, then I'm changing careers.
Right.
I'm not doing that.
I can't drive a car in the morning.
I can't do anything in the morning. I'm a night owl, and I've just embraced it. It brings its challenges with folks that don't understand it, and some folks that might be upset that you're sleeping, a little bit later than they are. But you can't fight it. Like, if it's just wired in your personality, my advice is to embrace it. Some of my most creative moments happen at like 11 or 12. They just do.
I'm with you in that. I'm a nap guy because I'm a night owl and I wake up early. So I take naps sometimes.
Well, Benjamin Franklin did that. Little known fact. He would sleep for like 4 hours at a time, work, 4 hours sleep, work. So you're not alone.
Yeah.
In good company.
My bedtime is usually like 1 or 2, but I like to get up at 7:30, do the little trade thing, and then I'll take a nap before work. I'll come in here fresh and ready to go.
Wait. 7:30, you're on Robinhood looking
Yes.
what you want to do on the predict. So any tips that you have for our listeners? Any money-making tips?
Well, I mean, that's maybe on my Patreon or something.
Oh, okay. All right. Subscribe to Porter's Patreon so he can support his gambling habit, apparently. All right. So we've still got a lot of good guests coming down. Good stuff today earlier from Scott Mitchell. Bill Bush just joined us. Kyle Bonagura from ESPN will stop by. Tony Parks, my old radio buddy, who is a massive Michigan fan. Coming up on the other side, we're going to do mostly wit stuff, and we'll continue to talk about this. It's not the only thing going on. The Jazz have actually played pretty well. BYU got a win in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Also, Porter's going to host our Utah pregame coverage for the bowl game. So we'll bring Porter in to kind of kick the tires on what his sourcing indicates that has gone down over one of the craziest weeks we've had here with this massive storyline as Kyle Whittingham is now the head coach of Michigan football. So Monday Drive, and it rolls on the other side right here on ESPN 700. Kyle Bonagura will join us in about 20 minutes from right now. Tony Parks in the 4 o'clock hour as well. Good stuff from Scott Mitchell and Bill Bush. Been a busy Monday show. Happy Monday to you. Happy holiday season. We're past Christmas. Of course, New Year's ahead. Winter has arrived. It's finally cold. The mountains are getting some snow. After during the Christmas week, it felt like we were living in like San Francisco. It was odd. The weather quality wasn't great. It was like 58 degrees at 7 o'clock at night. But chilly Monday. Good to have you with us. Porter, let's kind of kick the tires here for a little bit. The conversation that I was having with Sean during Crosstalk, I think it's really interesting because it's layered, right? So ultimately, when it comes to the potential and the opportunity that you would get to make a tremendous amount of money and generate generational wealth, not to be redundant there, not everybody gets that shot, during your lifetime. It's probably an opportunity that everybody would love to have. Now, when you actually get that opportunity, what do you weigh? What do you balance out? Because nothing is official, but if you listen to Kalani Sitake after the Pop-Tarts Bowl, it sounds like Jay Hill is going to take the defensive coordinator position. Multiple outlets have reported that. Nothing official about Jason Beck. I wouldn't be completely stunned if there's some sort of like handshake thing, like, yeah, dude, just go do the bowl game and then we'll figure stuff out afterwards. Then you hear Lewis Powell, you hear Sharif Shah, you hear, we could keep going. Jim Harding, of course, is the obvious one. So there are a tremendous amount of coaches in our market that now have to balance out this decision-making process. Look, I've said it a couple of times. I'll reiterate it. Utah cannot compete with Michigan resources. And that's not a Utah problem. That's a reality of what Michigan football is with a $20 billion endowment. If Witt wants Jim Harding, if he wants Jason Beck, if he wants Sharif or Lewis Powell or any of the coaches at BYU, including Jay Hill, he'll be able to offer them more money. As you balance out, whether or not it's worth it, quality of life to me isn't worth an extra $1 million. That's easy for me to say. If you feel like you're potentially sacrificing your quality of life, I think you only do that if you're guaranteed some sort of financial windfall over the course of 5 or 6 years that will change everybody's lives. But as we walk kind of through this process, there's also like, do you want to prove that your concepts and models as a coaching staff works on the highest of levels? That's the coolest thing to me about what we're going to see from Witt in Ann Arbor. But give me your take on this, what these coaches are balancing out as they have to make these decisions.
Well, it's obviously difficult when you're weighing your last 10, 20 years with what could be. And you bring up a good point. Everyone in this profession, I'm talking coaches, wants to move up, right? Even Morgan Scalley, who wants to be here at Utah, had some sort of want and need to elevate. And now we see him being the head coach. So, there's always going to be something in the back of your mind, even for Morgan, who does seem like a guy who'd be content being a Utah lifer. Hey, if the NFL comes calling one day or a bigger school comes calling one day, you usually hear them out just because of the nature of the profession, just because of the resources you get when you take a step up in whether it's conferences or schools or even leagues up to the NFL ranks, right? And there's a reason, Spence, that the day that Kyle, let's say, stepped down, you and I talked about, is this the last time he's coaching? And the reason that I said no that day was because of some of the job openings that were available throughout college football, or maybe some of the rumblings of job openings available around college football. And I just feel like there's a re-energizing factor as well, where Kyle's 65 years old, but when you get a chance like that, when you get a chance at, let's narrow it down, maybe Michigan, Ohio State, Florida. I don't even know if I want to include them anymore. USC.
LSU.
Yeah. That's it, really. Notre Dame, if you have like some connection there, those are the jobs outside of, I don't know, the LA Rams or the Dallas Cowboys that can call Kyle Whittingham and say, hey, why don't you kick the tires on this? And that type of resources, aura, ability to go out and show yourself at the highest level, that applies to the assistants as well. Jason Beck's not a guy who has much connection to Salt Lake City. He's actually a BYU guy. And hey, that's the other thing. BYU can offer him probably more money at this moment. Jim Harding and his wife are from that Ann Arbor, Ohio border area. There's a lot of history there with Jim. In fact, the only time he was very nearly, I don't know how much this has been reported on, maybe some behind-the-scenes stuff here. The only time Jim Harding was like very, very close to leaving, in fact, it was within hours, I think, of that actually going down, was to go to Cincinnati, Ohio to work for the Bengals. There are connections outside of just elevating, just moving up. There are a lot of connections here where I do see a good portion. I don't want to say the majority. I don't want to say there's an exodus to come, but I do think there are a number of assistants, both in Salt Lake and in Provo, who have either gotten or will get those calls and will weigh the opportunity and take it, especially following a guy that they know and trust and believe in. So, and we'll wait till the bowl game is played to get into really, who's going where. But, yeah, man, it would be really tough. If you're turning down the Michigan job, you're turning down an extra $700,000, maybe $1 million. You're turning down the ability to show what you can do to everyone in the country. And those are two things that, Utah might not be able to compete with. For me personally, it would take a miracle to get me out of this state. But I'm not someone who's calling plays on the defensive side of college football. Yeah. If Kyle Whittingham offered me a job, hey, I don't know, I might go. But that's it's different when you're working at a profession that is all about what can you do for me and how high can you take that? What level can you take this to? That's college football. That's coaching. And these guys are, I think, going to jump at it if they have that opportunity. I don't really think that Kyle, he said he's not going to go poach. That's for the players. When he's building a staff, everyone's on the table. And I believe just about everyone will consider taking that gig.
I am telling you, when I watched the Connor Stallions documentary, I'm like, Porter would be awesome at this. You are going to be the next iteration of Connor Stallions, but you're not going to cheat. You're going to be above board.
Okay.
Now look.
I'll wear a disguise.
I know you will. I mean, you have several looks already: the long hair, the shaved hair, the beard, the no beard. I mean, you could pull that off. If Whit was like, I need a sign stealer, but you can't get caught, I think you could do that.
Okay. Thank you.
You make some really good points. We'll just use this analogy. It'd be one thing if, as a producer of a sports talk radio program, you were offered $1 million.
Right.
Right. And so, of course, if you came to work one day and you're like, hey, I just got hired by Fox or whatever, they're going to pay me $1 million, you got to go take that. But if your salary already is like $3 million and you have a chance to make another $1 million, I just don't know if that's I'm sure this is going to fall on deaf ears because anyone would be like, dude, I would take $1 million. I would do anything to leave my job to make $1 million this year. I am telling you, I just know so many people that have a lot of money that are so miserable day to day. They cannot escape whatever is actually I think Jim Carrey said once upon a time he would love everybody to become rich and famous instantly. So you could see that is not going to solve your emotional pain. Not to get too deep in the weeds here. I'm not going to Eckhart Tolle everybody, but there's a lot of truth to that. Now, there's just a lot of people with a lot of financial resources that day to day just aren't very happy. So what you said about proof of concept on a national scale, I actually think would tip the scales more than a couple of extra $100,000 when it comes to whether or not you love where you live. That is invaluable. Now, again, let's be serious and grown up about this. If you go from, I don't know, you make a couple $100,000 a year, which is a great living, right? If you go from that to suddenly making $4 million a year, that's real money that changes your life. So you go do that for 4 or 5 years, you stack some cash, and then you can pick wherever you want to live. But when you're already in that ecosystem, Kyle doesn't need to make another penny for as long as he lives. When you're already in a spot where finances are not germane to your motivation. I think there are so many other things that come into play, and it's the health and happiness of yourself, and it's the health and happiness of your family and whether or not they like where they live. I think a lot of that just has to come into play. But the point you made about proof of concept on a national scale simply might tilt the scales for a lot of these coaches to go be brave and try to do this somewhere that's not Utah.
And you just think of like overarching goals, right? Kyle Whittingham's wanted to win a national championship. He has spoken to me about winning a Rose Bowl specifically is one of his like big things, right? Mm-hmm. Growing up in the shadows of that stadium.
Yeah.
And listen, man, it feels like you go 13-0, you go 12-0, you win a couple of conference championships, and you still don't get that opportunity. You still don't get a CFP entry, and then all of a sudden you get that opportunity.
Yeah.
Just by getting a job at a place that has a direct line to a national championship or to a college football playoff.
Yeah.
Go win 10 games at Michigan, they're not keeping you out of the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, to me, that's why I said it. It's a bigger part there than it is the money. That being said, Kyle Whittingham left a little bit on the table in the negotiation process so that he could offer his assistants a little extra incentive, I would say. Right? There were multiple people that were estimating that contract would be $50, $55, maybe $60 million. Mm-hmm. He took 41. Not that that's chump change. But Kyle left money on the table in that regard because he knows he's going to have to bring in a staff for his final stand, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be a little extra. Even at Michigan, there's going to be a little extra sweetener on those assistants' contracts, on those coordinators' contracts. And it's going to be really tough for any school. Any school. I'm not talking about Utah and BYU. He can go on a national search now and get position coaches he wants. And it'll be tough for them to turn that down, especially knowing the guy that they may be going.
Yeah. And, ultimately there are so many things that motivate decisions like this that it's just not simply about the paycheck. There are all these rumors that Jay Hill is potentially going to get a little bit of a backdoor promise that once Kyle is done in 5 years, that job is his. And a lot of people surmise that if Kalani had taken Penn State, they just would have moved Jay over a seat. And being the head coach at BYU is a really cool thing for people that have had that lifelong dream. I mean, Kalani talks about it all the time. As a guy who played for Lavelle, it's an unbelievable seat for him to sit in and potentially become, in his words, the Polynesian Lavelle. And I'm sure Jay Hill, who, of course, is a local coach at Utah, head coach at Weber State, would love to be BYU's head coach. But you know what everybody would prefer over almost any job in college football? To be the head coach at Michigan, where you have a chance to completely change the life of yourself and your family and then cement your legacy. Like if Kyle goes to Michigan and wins Big 12 championships and wins, a national, if he does what Urban did when Urban left here, Kyle will put himself on a list that sounds like Bo Schembechler and Urban Meyer and Newt Rockne. Instead of like, is Kyle the best coach in Utah football history? The answer is yes. But debating like, is it Kyle or Lavelle or Kyle or Mac? Kyle will put himself among the most rarefied. It'll be like, hey, do you think Kyle is as good as Saban is, who is widely believed to be the best coach of all time? This is the chance that he has. And when you're brave enough to do these things, the risk certainly is there, but the reward could be incredible. And I've talked about this a couple of times just through the prism of what happened with my family. My dad's with the Jazz. Really fun, cool thing to see that kind of start to take shape. They build a pretty good team. In '88, they go toe-to-toe with the Lakers, John and Carl. And to my father's credit, he took a risk to see if his proof of concept could work in Midtown Manhattan at Madison Square Garden. And there were a lot of people, by the way, including my mom, they were like, you don't have it in you. Like, there's no way that you're going to survive. And you're from Bountiful, Utah. Right. You're not making it work in Midtown Manhattan. And to his credit, he did for a decade. It was a really, really cool experience. So when it comes to the potential of being able to show the world that you're one of the best anywhere at what you do in a place like Michigan, I think a lot of these coaches are just going to be jacked up with that.
Well, and especially when you look at Kyle specifically, he's kind of maxed out what he can do here outside of, a Cinderella run to a national title or something. That now you actually get to show your proof of concept. Yeah, you went toe-to-toe with Nick Saban, kicked his butt. You, frankly, you have a 3-0 record against Michigan, right? Like, you have proved your concept, but now you get to, like, actually go prove your concept, not just to the people in Salt Lake City and the Mountain West footprint and around here. You get to prove your concept to Kirk Herbstreit and the world, right?
Yeah.
And that's something where even if, I feel like he's one of the best in the business, he never gets talked about with those names, right? Last couple of years, maybe he's talked about as a top 5 to 10 coach. Well, you look at the total wins in history, 10 wins next season ties him with Urban Meyer. He keeps going, and he's up in that list of the top 10, the top 15 coaches of all time when we're talking about FBS wins. And if you do that at Michigan and you add to that list with wins in big games, then, yeah, you're going to be talked about with the big names in college football coaching. I think that is deserved, but now you got to go prove it over the next 3 or 5 years that Kyle is in Ann Arbor. And it's still, to me, weird that we're having this conversation. Yeah. It looks weird. Yep. It feels weird. Seeing Kyle on the sidelines at the Michigan practice in Orlando, it's weird.
Yeah.
But, man, if he goes and wins, it's gonna look really good. And it'll be fun. Listen, we're Utah guys here. I'm a Utah man. I ordered my stuff from Sly. Utah man am I.
Nice.
I might be a little bit of a Michigan man for the next 5 years as well.
Oh, I'm not even apologizing for it. I'm all in. You can cheer for both schools. They don't play head-to-head. It's different. Look, the ultimate vision in my head is Utah wins the Big 12, Michigan wins the Big 10, and they play each other in the college football playoff, man. That's where I'm at with this.
Woo! Let's get real crazy. Let's just plan for that. Yes. Let's just plan for Scally versus Witt.
Are we manifesting?
Intentions.
Oh my gosh.
Let's just mark that down. Next December, January, a matchup between these two schools that we've got a little history. Harbaugh and Witt.
So wait, this is what every single female between the age of 30 and 50, this is what it feels like to do what they do. We're manifesting. We're speaking our intention into. Now, I believe the other step is you're supposed to feel the feeling as if it's already happened.
You got to visualize. You got to close your eyes.
Okay.
You got to see it happening. You got to speak about it. You got to think about it.
Okay, nice. I'm still very new to this black magic that's ruining our society, but I'll do my best to manifest. Yeah, bottom line, Kyle Whittingham goes to Ann Arbor, wins Big Ten championships, and competes and wins national championships. The names you hear will not be Lavelle or Mack or his peers. It will be Nick Saban. It will be Bear Bryant. It will be Woody Hayes. It'll be Tom Osborne. It'll be Urban Meyer, And Kyle watched Urban do his thing, and Urban obviously is a good friend of Witt. So the plot thickens. It's going to be a fascinating thing to watch play out. We'll catch a break. Kyle Bonagura will join us coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700. All right, Porter, during the break, because you referenced this right before, and if I knew this, I'd forgot. So Witt is exactly 10 wins behind Urban Meyer as far as the okay.
Yeah,
all right.
177. And once you get up in that 180, 200 range, you are in the most elite of elite company. Kyle, 2 years away from a lot of those numbers.
Yeah, so discussing the dynamic of what this could mean for Witt's quote-unquote legacy and is the place where he exists in the hierarchy of the greatest coaches of all time. If he goes to Michigan, which he is, and if he wins conference championships and wins national titles, we'll be talking about Kyle the way we talk about some of the best coaches in the history of the sport, not just whether or not he's the best coach in the state of Utah or the way he's been talked about so far. Our next guest covers college football for ESPN. He joins us on a weekly basis. Kyle Bonagura, my goodness, man, we've got a lot to get to. So I'm just going to launch right into it. What's it been like for you to watch this story unfold that is finalized with Witt in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, I mean, a bit surreal, right? I mean, for 2 years, I've been discussing with my editor, how should we write about Kyle Whittingham's retirement whenever that happens to be ready for that, right? So to shift gears from how do we put a bow on Kyle Whittingham's career at Utah to how do we set up Kyle Whittingham going to Michigan and what does that mean and how does Utah move forward with that? What's the trickle down effect? It's again just surreal to process because it would have felt like such an unlikely possibility just a couple days ago, maybe even, right? And so to sit here today and acknowledge reality is bizarre. And there's just, I feel like there's always some of this in college football during the carousel, but this is one that I wouldn't have pegged from 100 miles away.
Oh, it feels like a fever dream, man. I mean, when it comes to the way this is all unfolded, and just the visual of Witt wearing Michigan gear. We had a really good basketball team once upon a time here. Our listeners may not believe that, but there was a player named Karl Malone who spent his last 2 years with the Lakers. And seeing Karl wear a Laker jersey was so weird. Seeing Kyle in Michigan gear, it feels like a fever dream. But help us kind of put this into perspective a little bit, because honestly, Kyle, in 48 hours, Witt has become a national figure that he was never in 21 years here in Salt Lake. Like, Michigan fans asking questions about him, like, what's this guy's, what's he about? Everybody is talking about Kyle Whittingham across the landscape of the country, not just in this region or in this market. Put it in perspective, the magnitude of just the type of job the head coach of Michigan football is.
So Michigan's one of, I think almost everyone can agree that Michigan is one of the most prestigious football programs in existence, right? Most historic, it's up there, all-time wins. It checks all the boxes. It is like the definitive blue blood, right? In every way, Michigan's just a big deal. It plays in a big deal conference. It expects to compete for conference titles and national titles. Just won a national title a couple of years ago. So whoever was going to be in that chair was going to be a big deal, right? But what I think makes this one even more, interesting is just coming out of what has just happened at Michigan for weeks. The Michigan job in the athletic department has been a topic of, as part of the national conversation, right? For reasons that they would have obviously preferred not to have been the case. And so there's already eyes on Michigan from a football standpoint, but then you put it under the microscope even further because of the circumstances of Sharon Moore's, departure, right? And so you layer that together, it was whoever was going to come in was going to be placed in the spotlight even more. And for it to be Kyle Whittingham, just after announcing he was going to step down at Utah, where he is, the face of a program and has been for over 2 decades, he's so closely aligned and associated with the school and the state, right? For him to now step out of that comfort zone when retirement was the expectation, I just can't think of a precedent that's similar, that to have played out this way. And you mentioned Karl Malone, and I think that's that makes a lot of sense in terms of seeing them in their gear, right? But when Malone went to the Lakers, it's he's kind of going to be a bit player at the end, chasing a ring or whatever. That's not the case for Kyle, right? I mean, he's going to have so much pressure going to Michigan and becoming the head coach there, where the expectations are as high as they can possibly be. So this is him asking. I mean, he's certainly challenging himself. He's stepping in the pressure cooker. For so many reasons, this is just so fascinating.
And one of the most fascinating elements, and I think I've done 5 different hits on different shows in different markets, and I always say, the way to kind of take the pulse on how big a story is when it breaks locally here, twofold. How big is the pull from the actual news, not the sports department? And I've done a couple of hits for the news station here. And then how many people around the country want to talk about it? The answer with this is 2 for 2. So it really has become the story where everybody is discussing several different layers. But the one question I've been asked throughout the entire news cycle has been, how did this happen? Like, what happened behind the scenes? And there are several different pieces of several different pieces of information that have come my way. Some I feel really confident in, and the others, like, I'm waiting to hear from certain people on the record. I actually referenced this earlier, like, we'll let Boniger and Kamrani uncover this because we need actual journalism, when it comes to the way this went down. But I will say one thing, and then, you let me know what your thoughts are on exactly how we got here. I would imagine that whether it was Mark Harlan, whether it was Morgan being on, ready to kind of get this thing going, big money people, the news that Witt landed in Michigan with a bankroll to potentially come pillage everybody and take coaches and players probably wasn't a welcome piece of news for them to wake up to. And there's a real worry now in the market about who exactly is going to follow him. But what is your understanding ultimately of kind of how we got here?
Yeah, no, I'm still trying to piece it together myself. I think what I'm confident in saying is, like, there was no expectation at Utah that Kyle would go become a head coach elsewhere when it was kind of made clear to him, or at least insinuated, that, like, now's the right time, right? I think the message, and I think Kyle he didn't really want to get into it specifically, publicly. I'm sure all of this will come out at some point, but he clearly did not feel like there was clearly pressure for him to step down, right? And where that came from, it's probably not just one place, right? He's probably feeling that he probably felt some sort of sense of obligation to Morgan, that, hey, look, you've been the coach in waiting here for several years. I know this is what I said. So that's a piece of it. I'm sure some of it came from the athletic department and Mark Harlan about, hey, we're trying to get into our next era here. Donors, like all of those things are probably weighing in on some level what factored in more than others. I think time will tell on that before the truth really comes out, and I'll certainly be making phone calls to try to piece it together myself. But I think what's, as that pressure is being applied to Kyle, there was no consideration that, hey, if he's pressured out, he's going to go get a quote unquote better job somewhere else where he'll be armed with more resources to be able to take staff members. I think the whole idea of a coach in waiting, is to provide continuity because things are going so well, right? Kyle deserves all the credit for the state of the program. Morgan for sure, and the other coaches, but he's the top of the org chart. He's the guy. And so they wanted more of that. Like, that's the message that was being sent when Morgan was named the coach in waiting. He's like, when Kyle's gone, we want to keep things as they are. We want to maintain the momentum and keep the culture in place. But if you lose the head coach and now all of a sudden you have a bunch of coaches who are wanting to go with him, support staffers, whoever it might be, and it takes a bite out of your program, like, that's a problem, right? That is in complete conflict with the whole idea of having a coach in waiting in the first place to provide the continuity. So yeah, it becomes dicey, and now you're recruiting coaches away from Utah, and from that standpoint, Kyle Whittingham is now actively working against Utah. That's just the reality. That's black and white at this point now, and obviously he still has great affinity for the school and all those things. Like, that's not going to go away overnight. But now he's getting paid $8 million to be the head coach at Michigan and has to make the decisions that are in the best interest of that school. And so it's gonna set up an exciting few days on, maybe not exciting, but certainly interesting in terms of who stays, who goes. We've all seen the reports that maybe Jay Hill at BYU is in play, and so you have to when you go into a job like this, you have to rely on people you're confident in, and it only makes for sense for him to try to take the best people he can from Utah to help achieve success at his next stop.
I mean, I can't stop thinking, like, to be a fly on the wall when Mark Harlan got the text or Morgan Scalley got the alert that Kyle Whittingham has taken the Michigan job, and like the panic that probably ensued. I mean, these are smart guys that know the deal. Because to your point, I think if we were going to hear an Act 2 for Witt, first of all, I didn't think it was going to happen immediately. Second of all, when it did, I thought it would be more like maybe a defensive coach under Andy Reid for the Chiefs. And third of all, I don't think anybody was expecting that it was going to be Michigan. And ultimately, it also allows Kyle entrance into – look, I know people get bugged when I say this around here. There just are a tremendous amount of people – that are in the sport or cover the sport, they refer to it as a P2 sport now, not a P4 sport. And if Kyle wins 10 games in Michigan, he is in the college football playoff. He might even win the Big Ten championship. But this it's an upgrade in a lot of ways, Kyle, but it also gives Witt entrance into the most elite room in all of college football now, being in the Big Ten. Or the SEC, but he's in the Big Ten instead of the Big 12 that I think a lot of people believe at some point might be in a different ecosystem than either the Big Ten or the SEC, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's part of what makes this so interesting, right, is that he, it's like the timing, like so much of this is timing, right? If Michigan wasn't in the spot, it would be like I have a hard time believing that Kyle was just going to go do any job, right? He's not going to go to pick one, go to I don't know, Fresno State or something like that. Like that was just never going to happen, right? But you have this opportunity, and it's really you have this like life opportunity, right? To hey, like we got a chance to swing for a national title. There's only so many programs that can legitimately expect to be in the running consistently for a national title based on the resources. Michigan is one of them, right? And so you can totally understand why that's intriguing. If he has, if he realized over the last, year or whatever the time frame might have been, that he still has a lot to give and is still competitive and chomping at the bit to kind of do the job, as long as he's got the energy in the tank. Yeah, I mean, this is a professional challenge that's really interesting for him to take on.
Yeah. Again, the layers to just how big this story has become and the magnitude of it, certainly around here, have been really interesting. And, I want to move into this space because we've been discussing it. We just have to be real about what could potentially be an arms race to try to hold on to some of these coaches while Michigan could potentially come try to hire them. The bottom line is Utah can't keep up when it comes to simply resources. Michigan has more resources than Utah. Also, Michigan gives Jay Hill, Jason Beck, Lewis Powell, Jim Harding, whoever is on the list, it gives them the opportunity to show if their proof of concept is transferable to the biggest and most intense stage in all of college football. Help us understand, though, with great power comes great responsibility. I don't know if that was Yoda or whatever, but that's something that somebody said at one point that appears to be real. What sort of microscope is Witt under now? What is the pressure like to deliver at Michigan, which might be one of the biggest pressure cookers in all of college football?
Yeah, I mean, you don't get a pass for going 5-7, right? You don't have the built-in goodwill that he has at Utah, right? There'll be none of that anymore, and I think that's fine. Like I think that like college football is very much trending towards you can reset in a year, right? Like you don't have to build up a program over multiple years if you're one of these bigger schools, or really anyone. It's almost like wrestlers reset everywhere, regardless of what your resources look like. It's just it would reset for different reasons. One is losing, one is restocking, whatever it might be. But yeah, like I think it's the pressure component I think is real. Like there is certainly more media pressure, fan pressure, there's more eyes on it and all those things. And maybe that is something that will, affect Kyle in some way, but I've also never really got the sense from being around him, and you've been around him much more than I have, but I just don't think he really looks at it that way, and that is so focused on, hey, the control we can control, very football jargony stuff or coach speak, I guess. So I think his temperament and personality fits a big time job, just because I think he's been around, he's confident in his own abilities, he's confident in his processes, and that's all you can really do. And so I think he'll do well to deal with some of those off the field issues that kind of are inherent to the job. But it doesn't mean that there won't be different. It won't be a change. There will be more interest and feedback if things go poorly. But to be honest, I think he'll do well there. Like I think it's culturally a good fit. I think the style of football that he's coached for a long time fits at Michigan. I think he's obviously won a lot for a long time, and had a great year this year and came up close, came up short to win a conference title. But a couple plays go differently in the BYU game, or even the Texas Tech game, and they could still be alive in the playoffs. And so the margins are pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, look, I've said this a few times today. I'll probably repeat it over and over. I fully will admit my bias when it comes to Whit and watching what he's done here. His first year as head coach kind of coincided with my first year in media, so I really had this front row seat, whether it's the Fiesta Bowl, 4, of course, Urban was the head coach, but Whit was the defensive coordinator. I do think 2008 will kind of go down as, the most important stamp that Kyle put on this program, even though it was not a Pac-12 year or a Big 12 year. They had the undefeated season in 04, but Urban was the head coach. Kyle gets the gig, and, a couple of seasons go by that weren't the same, and folks wondered if he could do anything close to what Urban did. And that 2008 team, it culminated with a win over Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, and that kind of put him on the map around here in a way that felt like it cemented his status. But if we move over to the Morgan piece of this, part of me feels really bad for Morgan because he's been here 6 years now as the coach in waiting for his opportunity. And if Whit succeeds in snatching, Kyle himself during the introductory press conference said he's taking, I think, 7 or 8 coaches with him who he trusts. And you have to surmise that includes Jay Hill, and maybe it includes 5 coaches from Utah, whether it's Jim Harding, Jason Beck, Lewis Powell, Sharif Shah. So Morgan might, in a matter of days, have to completely rebuild this staff and then deal potentially with trying to retain players. Of course, I'm cheering for him. He's a friend, and I think he's the right guy for this gig. But if Whit wins the Big Ten next year with a laundry list of Utah coaches on his roster, and Morgan wins like 5 games because he had to rebuild the entire thing, I think there are going to be a lot of people around here second-guessing the way they decided to handle this.
Yeah, that's just the nature of it, right? It makes 100% the way this played out is going to make it more difficult for Morgan to have success. That's just a fact. It's more difficult. Like the coach retainment piece is big, and he's also a guy who's been at Utah for a really long time, right? And so when you see some of these coaches who bounce around a little bit, they get to know coaches in other places. They're exposed to different systems and develop relationships in other places. But for Morgan to be at Utah for so long, he certainly will have enough connections to build a staff. Utah's a desirable place to work, so it won't be hard to build a staff. But it's harder for him than it would be, someone else who has bounced around, is in similar circumstances, and their network is just developed in a different way, right? All he's known is Utah for a very long time, and so with that being the case, there's that's good and bad, right? He was working under Kyle, and obviously there's a reason Michigan hired him because of all the success. So he's in the building and exposed to all those, the operations, and a big part of that, right? He deserves a ton of the credit for how good this team has been defensively for a long time. But yeah, on one hand, you can I guess let's take a positive spin on it though, which I think is fair to Morgan. Well, I was around at Stanford when David Shaw took over for Jim Harbaugh. And Jim Harbaugh took a lot of the coaches, the most valuable coaches, to the 49ers. And David Shaw had been at Stanford for, he's a Stanford guy and was the coordinator and kind of was wasn't hand chosen by Jim Harbaugh, but it was a similar deal in that they wanted to keep the continuity, right? Hey, this has been working. Let's hire this guy. And then, you got to go hire your own guys. And he was able to do that. And Stanford maintained a really high level of success there for several years before things went south several years later. But it does force you to get out of your comfort zone and kind of start acting, being more like a CEO and hey, this is what I think worked. This is where we were maybe not as good, and maybe he'll be able to identify some spots to where they can improve his process as well and develop a program that is more in his vision to kind of compete in this era of college football, which is obviously unique and different and changing, by the day, it feels like.
For sure. It's been such a wild news cycle around these parts in a way that we don't really experience very, very, very much. And one of the pieces of the news cycle, Kyle, before I set you loose, of course, included the potential of Kalani Sitake taking the Penn State job. And he was able to parlay those conversations for a very nice raise for himself and a very nice raise for his assistants. And again, it looks like he's going to lose one of them. One of them, as Jay Hill is reportedly on his way to Ann Arbor. But we talked last week about the absurdity at times of some of these non-CFP bowl games. And, whether it's cougar tails or ice cream or flavored soda, drug very much, the weapon of choice down in Provo is very much sugar as far as what they like to consume. It feels like they need to play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl every time unless they make it to the CFP. It's such a perfect match. Orlando, they get to do the Disney thing. LDS folk, they love the Disney World thing. But they beat a Georgia Tech team that was solid, and I actually enjoyed the game. I'm not sure if you watched it, but BYU, for the fifth time in program history, wins 12 games. So your thoughts on the Pop-Tarts Bowl and the season that was for Brigham Young down south?
Yeah, I was in and out a bit during the game, so I don't have, I didn't have a great understanding of the cadence of it, but certainly unaware what happened. And I think what's cool about the Pop-Tarts Bowl is that in this era where bowl games matter, less and less, and people are down on them, they've managed to tap into something fun, right? Where people are getting excited about the game, and it looks like the players all had a good time. The coaches seem to embrace the experience down there. I know a couple of the people down at that bowl, and I know that they've been really excited about kind of how they've been able to navigate everything over the last couple of years, and to kind of see people still embrace bowl shows why they still exist, right? Not all of them are going to be like that or have such good teams show up in not very few opt-outs and all of that. So yeah, 12 wins for BYU, that's that's beyond success, right? If you did that every year, there'd be a statue of Kalani pretty soon. And then to turn down Penn State while you do that, it's a really cool story. And I think it's going to be, we should revisit this in a few weeks to see how Texas Tech does, because I think Texas Tech's a team that's good enough to win the whole thing.
Yeah.
And if they do that, Notre Dame was the school that everyone said was so aggrieved, but when the dust is settled, if Texas Tech makes a run and BYU is like, hey, look, our only two losses were the team that, finalists or won the whole thing, and we didn't get into the playoff, I don't think there's you necessarily need to be sympathetic for BYU or any team that gets left out with a 12-team playoff, but they would have just as good a story to tell as Notre Dame at the end of it. Hey, we only lost to this one team the whole year. We probably could have done pretty well in this thing as well.
Kyle, appreciate the time, man. Historic week or so around here. Always enjoy the perspective. Have a great New Year, and we'll chat soon.
Sounds good. See you.
Kyle Bonagura covers college football. His sign-off is one of my favorites. Of all the consistent guests we have, sounds good. See you. Boom. Gone.
Bye. Now, he's got to get on the phone.
He's busy. He's an actual reporter. He will. Is it going to be Kamrani, Bonagura? Who's gonna crack it? Who's gonna release the thing that has all the stuff on the record that we actually learn how this all went down?
Checketts.
No, it will not. I think it's CK.
Probably at least the one to put it together in a digestible form, but that might be in 15 years when Kyle's ready for his memoir.
Correct. It could be Monson, could be the Trib, but I feel like, well, I'll just say I think CK is already on the scent.
Fair enough.
And we'll leave it there. All right.
He's with us Friday.
He is, so stay tuned for that. Shout out to our good friends at Burt Brothers today. Right now, you can save up to $110 on Firestone tires or up to $120 on Bridgestone tires. It's the perfect time to replace worn tires and head into the new year with confidence. But hurry, these end-of-the-year deals will not last long. With over 30 years of experience and nearly 30 locations, Burt Brothers ASE certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every location. They stand behind their products and services with industry-leading warranties and low-price guarantees. One-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance, from tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, now offering value tire options such as Americas and Summit tires, starting at just $69 with warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by a Burt Brothers or Tire Busters location or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. More information can be found at burtbrothers.com. We'll catch a break. Tony Parks, my old radio pal, who is a lifelong Michigan fan, will join the show coming up on the other side on ESPN 700. I said, let's play the Michigan fight song. Now, obviously, we're not, doing anything other than making our guy feel comfortable. But to get some perspective on just what sort of, like the magnitude of this story and just what a big job this is, thought we'd bring in one of my buddies, my old radio guy back in the day, Tony Parks, on a Monday afternoon. TP, how we doing, bud?
I am doing really well. Fantastic. And thank you for playing that. I was pumping my fist into the air on each part of Hail to the Victors, and excited about the future of the program, man. So thanks for having me on.
No, for sure. And you're one of the first people I thought of because you're one of the few people that has perspective on both programs, on what Kyle built here over 21 years and the magnitude of what it means to be the head coach at Michigan. Look, we talked about this pretty quickly right out of the gates because the timing of Kyle's announcement that he was stepping down coincided with Sharon Moore just losing his job in the most insane possible way that you could lose the job. And over the past 4 or 5 years, I mean, if we're honest, yeah, there's been winning. There's even been a national championship, but there has been this culture that is very anti what Michigan is known for and which just the safest hire you could have. So give me your thoughts on, covering Kyle here for as long as you have and what you think the fit looks like with Kyle now in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I remember being in Michigan Stadium. I'm sitting there. It's 2014, and I remember going into the game. It's Utah at Michigan, and I remember saying, this is the beginning of the end of Brady Hoke. I mean, this program is full of themselves. Dave Brandon, full of himself, the AD at the time. And the whole entire time I'm sitting there watching them get fairly beaten pretty soundly. It was 26-10. They didn't have an offensive touchdown. It was clear that it was well below what they should have been. They got dump trucked by Minnesota. They're a bad team. And I just kept sitting there thinking, man, this is not what this program should be. And the whole entire time, people remember that game for the monsoon and the delay. And I just remember looking across the sideline and being like, that's the guy. Like, that's exactly what I want here. That guy right there. Not just because I know him, not just because I've been around him in his career, but I've watched the guy do more with less. I've watched the guy be excellent with problem solving. No coach has ever been better at adjusting to new situations better than Kyle Whittingham. I mean, from post-urban, social media, Pac-12 era, then you go into, COVID, sadly, death of players, NIL, transfer portal, different OCs, you name it, shuffling the deck in a variety of different ways. This guy has been the very best at just being adaptable, because it's all about winning the day, winning the next step. And in every way, he represents what Michigan is. Character, toughness, fundamentals, culture. He walks the walk in every single way. I just remember sitting there being like, thinking it'll never happen. He's a Utah guy, and, this program doesn't really seek out a coach like this when they should. And I never could have imagined that, 10, 11 years later, he'd be the head coach of this team. And after the absolute disaster that was Sharon Moore, the whole season it was a hollow 9 wins with a lack of fundamentals, lack of focus. And each one of my family members, friends, when we would talk about the team, they're like, something is just missing. There's just something amiss about this group. Lack of attention to detail, something is not right. And the whole entire time, I kept watching it, thinking to myself, like, I don't know what's going on. And then you find out what goes down, and you're thinking, oh, well, that explains a lot of what just happened. And after all of this, we end up having Kyle Whittingham as our head coach. Never could I have seen all of that come together. So if you're Michigan, you couldn't have asked for a better turnout to what was an absolute disaster. And to your point, the last 5 years, you're right. Stallions, corrupt computer behavior, coach suspensions, affairs, inappropriate relationships, a bizarre scene in an apartment complex with a threat of a potential murder-suicide. And by the way, heart goes out to everybody who's involved and has felt the ripple effects of that. And for the program to see something like that and have this kind of a turnaround, you couldn't have asked for a better result.
Yeah, dude, it was so wild to follow that news cycle because the Sharon Moore news hit right as we were ending the show. And I was like, wow, breaking news. Sharon Moore has lost his job. And then I'm driving home and I get the alert. I'm like, he's in jail?
What?
Like, what? Like, okay. And then the news cycle continues where, wait a second, it was the staffer And now the whole thing was just so surreal. And it does appear to be a community that needs to heal a little bit. You tell me from your perspective, what has the reaction been among Michigan fans? Because I've seen a lot of genuinely confused people. Like, wait a second, Utah's guy, Kyle Whittingham, like, what's his deal? Because there's so many people that just don't pay attention to your flyover states and the Big 12. But Kyle Whittingham has become a national name in like 48 hours in a way that he never was here in 21 years. But just give me the general pulse on the Michigan fan base. What's the reaction to this hire?
Elated. I mean, absolutely elated. And what's incredible is watching how the two fan bases have this unbelievable respect for one another and this great common belief system. The way Utah football built itself into what it is, and then obviously Michigan has been an established brand. We know that. We understand the difference financially. But in terms of, like Utah is not a Midwestern state, but a lot of what Utah football has been built on is Midwestern values, and that's hard work, determination, and enthusiasm unknown to mankind, the toughness, the unselfishness, family, all this stuff, right? And so the Michigan fan base has been excited because in that press conference, to hear him say, the team, nobody's more important than the team, it's like, hold on. Did you hear Bo Schembechler's speech? He didn't just say the team, but Kyle actually was dropping different subtleties and lines that came from that speech. People know the speech where it's the team. It's everything else that was in that speech that made it so moving. And then that team went on to do what they did, and Michigan has really hung its hat on so many unique principles and things like that. Michigan, it's a high academic standard. It's a cold weather climate. You don't have some of the advantages of Ohio State. So you have to be great at all the other things to be able to try and win Big Ten championships and national championships. So when the national pundits are like, this fan base thinks they're as big as this and that, no, they don't. It's just that you're like the third highest public institution, and you're trying to overcome Ohio State, who has more resources, more budget, more this, more that. And so, Ohio State, in one of the big games they had, Michigan beat them, and Ohio State had like 13 or 15 five-star players. Michigan had one or two. So you have to be excellent at all the things that Kyle Whittingham is excellent at. And it builds with family, and it builds with culture, and nobody's more important than the team, and ego aside. We don't become you become us. Everything he said. Every time I've looked at Kyle Whittingham, I'm like, you don't have to be from Grand Rapids to be a Michigan man. You don't have to be you don't have to put up your hand and show the mitten and point at your hand where you're from to be a Michigan man. A Michigan man is about a mentality. It's about what you represent. It's about what you're all about. And Kyle Whittingham represents every bit of that. So, sure, there's the, hey, he's 66. What do we really know? But as this kept unveiling, people there in the program and all over the state and all over the Midwest are like, whoa, this might be a heck of a lot better than any of us thought. And Urban Meyer has said it. This is the best coach in college football. And it's not just because he's the plucky coach who goes out there and overcomes challenges. No, guys, no. He had ravaged with injuries in the Rose Bowl. COVID, all this stuff in the Rose Bowl. Transitioning after Urban, all of a sudden, Sugar Bowl championship, beating Nick Saban, Alabama. The dude just overcomes all the time. Now he's done more with less, and now we're all looking around going, now we're going to find out what he can do when it comes to doing more with more? Okay. And that's I just think he is such a great fit for everything he is, and then especially the guys he can bring. I don't think I could have a better perspective on just what he is, what Michigan is, and how this is a match made in heaven. I mean, I can't believe this is real.
We are very fortunate to have a great college football rivalry here with BYU and Utah, among the most unique, maybe the most unique rivalry, quite frankly, when you consider all the elements and the cross-pollination and the proximity and such. Help us understand what Michigan versus Ohio State means.
I mean, it means so much because it goes back so many years. Woody and Bo, obviously the border war. It goes back way before even football. If you go into the history of it, it means so much just because there's so much pride and each university being very different on the way they do things. I've always said in the state of Utah, this rivalry among the fans is as good as any you'll ever see. But the programs have great respect for each other. The coaches have great respect for each other. You hear what Kalani says in postgame, locker room sessions, and he's right on the money, and it's what makes him great. It's what made Lavelle great. It's what made Ryan Mack great. That doesn't exist with Ohio State, Michigan. What's cool with Kyle Whittingham is he's all about respect for the game, respect for good coaches, things like that. The best thing he's going to do is bring focus onto let's fix Michigan first, and let's get that part right first, and then we can start worrying about who someone else is. The rivalry is huge because, Ohio State has historically the biggest budget, historically a wealth of players to choose from. It's very difficult because when Ohio State is operating at an optimal level, everyone else plays for second. It's just really hard. It's really tough. So when Jim Harbaugh wasn't beating Ohio State initially, I'm going, well, yeah. Like, you think you're just going to roll out of bed and trade victories with Urban Meyer in his prime? No. Like, your best, even if you go back to some of those years, your best receiver was Roman Wilson. Their best receiver was Garrett Wilson. They're dealing with Jackson Smith and Jigba. They're dealing with Jeremiah Smith right now. Like, you're talking top flight dudes. So you have to beat them physically. You have to beat them schematically. You have to beat them in all these other areas. And that's what makes it special when Michigan gets their turn to win 4 in a row or to have a national championship window. So they win it in 48, they win it in 97, and then 2023. So they're the winningest team ever. But what it takes to be better than Ohio State, it means you truly have to be the best in all the areas that we love sports for and what it's about. Jim was able to get the program to that point, albeit, and we know all the rest of the circus, but the players and the buy-in and how special those teams were, that's why it was so easy to fall in love with what that team was. That's what made the 97 team so special. And now you feel like with Kyle Whittingham, wait a second, you have something that Bo Schembechler, Lloyd Carr, and then Jim at the end of his career was able to put together in terms of that team chemistry, that team bond, and that being able to overcome so much. And that's what makes Kyle, and I think that's what makes him a great fit. So the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry is special, but let's remember when the Coyote beats the Roadrunner, it feels even better. And when Ohio State's operating at optimal level, they're the Roadrunner, and you better be great in every area, physicality, fundamentals, because if you're not, Ohio State runs you off the field.
And obviously, Ohio State is in a very good spot as the Vegas favorite to win the national championship again. All right, moving into the space of what year one will look like for Witt with Michigan, I have their schedule pulled up. So they've got some really tough asks year one. They're at Autzen to play Arizona. The Ohio State game is in Columbus. They do get Penn State at home. Of course, Penn State in a bit of a flux. They get Oklahoma at home. Iowa's at home. UCLA is in Ann Arbor. So what, in your estimation, proof of concept year one with Michigan football, what does success look like?
Year number one, you're borderline in or out for the playoff. You have some really tough road games there, obviously. The other thing is you're in flux with your off season. So that first year, you're just trying to grab alignment, which I think you're ahead of schedule compared to most guys jumping into this program. Get the assistants you want. You get a number of things going your way. The cool thing about Michigan coming out, like last year they were 9-3, but that was a pretty easy schedule. They just had 3 teams that were even in their weight class. Everybody else, they were just better than. So they beat the 9 teams they were better than, barely in some cases. And then, in my opinion, never really competed with the teams that were better than them. So this time, you don't get beat up physically. You don't get outsmarted, outcoached, out anything. You're just trying to create yourself, the best version of yourself. And how quickly you can get there is going to tell the story. So Ohio State game will be at the very end, and that could be the difference between being in or out of the postseason. The Oregon game, I don't know where it lands, right? So early in this thing, Michigan has got to polish fundamentals, polish physicality, and be that Kyle Whittingham team that they want to be in terms of its core basics. As the year goes on, how great do they become and what kind of team can they be? I think they'll be right on the brink in or out of the playoffs, but if they go 10-2, they're in, and I think they're right on that fringe. They're 9.5 wins, and so success would be getting in the playoffs. That's what it would be. And that's what I'm excited for, because last year at no point did they look like a playoff team. And I think this year you saw a Utah team that most of the year looked like a playoff team. They just lost a couple of the key games. So to me, that's success for Kyle Whittingham, but I think they carry huge momentum then going into year two and on with true identity And players know, I go there, I can get paid, I can win at a high level. Oh, and I know what I'm getting into with a group of guys who can help me get to the NFL. So success will be winning physically, winning 10 games, and getting into the playoffs.
They've got 8 home games and only 4 road games. I'm just noticing this. Wow. They also have Indiana. Of course, I should have referenced Indiana because they're one of the top teams in college football. On the flip side, Tony, because we had Kyle Bonagura on earlier, and Kyle, he's like, look, with Michigan, with the pressure cooker that job is, 5-7 is not, it doesn't cut it. You can't. So on the flip side, what would the noise sound like if in year one, Witt we'll just say he goes 500? What sort of sound do you think will surround him there?
Terrible. That'd be unacceptable in every single way, because you're dealing with far more and working with far better than most of the teams that you're seeing on that schedule. Not every team, but most of the teams you're seeing on that schedule, especially if you were to be soundly beaten and not competitive in some of those most important games, right? So that, and the noise would be loud right away. And Witt knows that. I mean, Kyle's not coming into this going, all right, guys, just baby steps, bear with me here. No, he gets it, and he knows exactly what it is, just like Jim Harbaugh knew. I mean, he came into a 5-7, just a team that was dog meat, and turned them into a 10-win team and a punter handing a game off. Otherwise, they win 11 games. So in that scenario, Jim understood that and turned them around right away. And in my opinion, Kyle knows, he's not walking in to dip his toes in and, hey, we're all just trying to get familiar with each other here. It's a first year. Oh, no. Kyle knows. 10 and the playoffs. He understands that is what the expectation is. And so for Kyle, he's not foreign to it. For any coach that goes with him, they get what the deal is. Kyle signed up for it. And by the way, he wants that. He wants that type of pressure and expectation. He doesn't want to be the guy that, wins a certain number of games and then complains about the system and complains about this era of college football and complains about what was out of his control. Kyle's a no excuses type of dude. And that's one reason why I think he's going to be a great fit there. And that fan base is going to be a great fit for him.
So we're hearing reports that Jay Hill is joining him in Ann Arbor. We're seeing reports that Kyle would very much like to grab Jason Beck and others, including Jim Harding. Kyle himself, during the introductory press conference, which still looks so weird, dude. It was like Malone in a Laker jersey is what I tweeted out. I mean, it just looked odd. But Kyle himself said he's bringing 7 to 8 assistants with him. What are your thoughts on what that list will look like once it's finalized?
Well, I don't think there's any guy who would love to have Jay Hill there. I think that's enormous. All of a sudden you become a defense that instead of surviving on some takeaways, you thrive on takeaways. You have the dudes to finish big defensive plays. On top of that, you are perfect in terms of your fundamentals. You're a great tackling team. Wink Martindale did an outstanding job as defensive coordinator there, but I think Jay Hill becomes a huge boost there. Coach Harding, I think, would be a terrific addition, especially with his connection right there to that area. And I think he has been, when you look at some of Utah's best years, he deserves a ton of credit for his work, overall in all of that. One guy I personally would like to have is Coach Elisaya for his work and what he does is strength and conditioning and everything that's involved with his expertise in those ways. And then, a lot of that's up in the air in terms of what could be available with coaches that are there at BYU and other guys with local ties. Who antes up in terms of trying to help keep guys on their staff. That, I think, is going to be a really big part of this. But the core cornerstones, I think, would be Jim Harding. I think it'd be Coach Beck. I think it would be Coach Hill. And if you bring that there, I think you end up having, some of that consistency and the continuity that Coach Whittingham wants to have. And then in terms of retaining staff members, if they can keep Coach Alford, I think is an enormous grab in terms of what they have and his work with the running backs. Things are shaping up to have the kind of staff that they want all together. And Coach Whittingham understands, I don't think he takes this job unless he was overwhelmingly certain who would be coming with him. And so when he took the job, that's what else I was excited about. Because he's not going there and going, all right, let me make a few phone calls and see what we got. No, I think he already had a very good gauge about who was flowing with him to Ann Arbor. And I think when you look at what Ann Arbor is, when you look at the University of Michigan, and then you have the type of dudes that are coming in there, dudes that eat, sleep, breathe football, guys that know the game exceptionally well, guys that recruit really well, and guys that win with authenticity, Jay Hill's a perfect fit, Coach Beck a perfect fit, Coach Harding a perfect fit, obviously Kyle Whittingham, and we'll see what the rest of it looks like. But I just know there should be a lot of optimism just because however Kyle builds it and the way he builds it, it's going to be set up for success.
Well, I'll be cheering for him. I admit my bias when it comes to Witt. It continues to be surreal. But before I say you lose, of course, Utah football now moves on to a new generation, a new era under Morgan Scalley. Part of me feels bad for Morgan. This is a tough way to get started, and I wonder what his reaction was when he heard that Witt was getting the Michigan job. I would imagine he's trying his best to retain everybody that he wants, but the fact of the matter is there's no other way to put it. Utah just doesn't have the resources Michigan does. So give me your thoughts on the new generation before I say you lose, Tone, of Utah football and the challenge that Morgan has now.
Well, the challenge of Morgan is going to be obviously building a staff with guys who've done great work, guys who've been mentored for a long time and are now ready for this opportunity. Remember when we didn't know who Jay Hill really was as a coach? He was just kind of a guy on a staff who's been helpful and successful and doing nice things. I remember when Kalani Sitake was given a promotion, and there was a press conference, and it was really about a lot of other things, but he was there. And I remember seeing him in his khakis, and he was stepping up on the stage, and it was like, oh, cool. Yeah, way to go, Kalani. Like, all right, well-deserved. Like, that's awesome. So I remember, if you go back and you look at historically some Utah football staffs, and you look at some of the names, and you look at their positions, and you go, wow, he climbed quickly. Like, that's really awesome. The state of Utah, the University of Utah, everything that was built there by McBride to Urban to Kyle has been set up for guys that are not household names that are earning opportunities for promotions and are ready to thrive. They're not ready to kind of come in and learn as they go and let's be a little patient. No, they're ready. They're ready for this. They're ready for these opportunities. So I'm excited for Morgan Scalley, who has great relationships and has been excellent when it comes to coaching coaches, to now show off his abilities to do that. And I think the standard for Utah to be great is still right there. And I think Morgan Scalley is going to uphold that. It's just that there's some unknowns, and those unknowns keep us feeling a little uncertain about what's happening with the future. But I think Morgan is more than capable when it comes to managing a staff, more than ready when it comes to promoting the right people and continuing a culture and establishing a new culture that has his fingerprints on it. And so I no matter what, as excited as I am for Michigan football, the concerns that people have for Utah football, I don't have those concerns because I think you have the right people, you still have the right culture, and all the right things to be a great program in the future. So I'm excited for Morgan, and I think he's going to capitalize on this opportunity. I think he's going to thrive.
Fascinating stuff, man. It has been a wild couple of weeks around here, Tony, as you know, dude. I appreciate your time today. Safe travels, be well, and Happy New Year, okay?
Thanks, my man. It's still so surreal to hear Kyle say those first few words of the press conference and go, okay. It's like, wait, whoa. Yeah, and you're right. Seeing him in the different shirt, it almost looks all AI. Doesn't even feel real yet. But great story in college football. And by the way, big tip of the hat. You, OC, Scott Mitchell, everybody, amazing work on your day off during the holidays to, on the moment, get on the air and provide great content. I don't think it should be lost. You and I both know you get very few days off in this business. And for you to use one of those and be on your game like you were, I don't think people really understand how great of a contribution that is for you to this community. Love the show. Love what you do. And thanks for having me on.
Appreciate the words. The great Tony Parks, a Michigan man and a media member out here for a number of different years, giving us some perspective on what has simply been a historic week as Kyle Whittingham has moved from Utah to moved from Salt Lake City to Ann Arbor to coach Michigan, which is a sentence that still does not necessarily fully process in my brain. All right, we will catch a break. Final hour of the show comes your way next. We got some Utah basketball on the station tonight. Monday Night Football. We'll wrap up your week in pro football. Do want to tell you about my friends at Game Day Men's Health. As the new year comes, you might be setting, I think we're supposed to say intentions now instead of resolutions, but whatever language you use, it might include wanting to get back in shape, wanting to get in better shape, wanting to lose weight. Game Day Men's Health is the spot that can kind of put you on a path where you can utilize their resources to just help you along in the process. Because as you age, it's simply harder to get back in shape or get in better shape. That's just the deal. And if you've tried in your 30s, 40s, 50s, it's different than it was in your 20s. And a couple of years ago, I set a goal. I'm like, I want to get in the best shape I've been in as an adult. Tried a couple of different things for a few months, and it just wasn't working the way I hoped that it would. Had a friend ask if I had ever supplemented testosterone, which I had not, and recommended Game Day Men's Health. So over the past couple of years, I utilized what people call biohacking now with my friends at Game Day Men's Health, and I'm happy to report that not only am I in the best shape I've ever been in as an adult, I've been able to maintain it, which, of course, is the biggest thing. There's no shortcuts. You got to work out and eat right and all the things. But for me, utilizing their testosterone therapy and their peptides completely changed the game. And they also have semaglutide, tirzepatide, all the weight loss stuff that's been kind of in the news because it works so well. So here's the deal. You get a free consultation as a listener to this show, and they're giving you 50% off your first-year membership, which is the same deal they give me. It actually makes everything super affordable. So go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com right now. That's GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Lehigh, Pleasant Grove, Cottonwood Heights is the one I use, and then South Ogden. Schedule this free consultation. Tell them you heard me talking about it. They're going to give you 50% off your first-year membership. It's our good friends at Game Day Men's Health. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go, right here on ESPN 700. All right, let's go. Drive at 5 time, Monday afternoon style, about 11 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. Monday Night Football tonight will conclude your weekend in the NFL. Doesn't mean anything, but I love watching the Rams play, so that should be fun. The Falcons have been eliminated. The Rams cannot move up. Rams have locked in a playoff spot. So that comes your way. Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, 6:15 kick. The Rams are a 7.5-point favorite. 7.5-point favorite. We have one listener that gets really upset when I say that. But we do have some interesting subplots coming up this weekend in the world of the NFL. Most of the playoff spots are dialed in, but the two Saturday games are the ones that hold the most implication. ABC and ESPN lucked out here. It's the Panthers and the Bucks in Raymond James Stadium, and then the Seahawks and the Niners. It's Santa Clara at Levi's Stadium. The winner of that game is the number 1 seed and wins the division. The loser will be either 5 or 6 in the wild card spot. Both are in. But some interesting stuff in the world of the NFL. Of course, our content today has been steeped in what has been a historic week or so, maybe a little bit more than that, a couple of weeks here in Salt Lake concerning our local college football ecosystem and storylines, as Kyle Whittingham was announced as Michigan's head coach on Sunday morning in Orlando, a sentence I never thought I would say into a microphone. And now, as we've discussed today, the conversation turns into what comes next. BYU beat Georgia Tech in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, so their season is now over. As Whitt alluded to himself, he said he had planned to take 7 to 8 assistant coaches with him to Ann Arbor, and the reports right now are that Jay Hill, BYU's defensive coordinator, will be one of them. Utah, of course, will play their bowl game coming up on Wednesday. I want to remind you that you can join Porter, join that guy, for Las Vegas Bowl pregame show, December 31st from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at Young Chrysler Dodge Ram Jeep, which is 1481 West Riverdale Road. So Porter's going to have you taken care of with pregame coverage on Wednesday. So set your alarm for 9:30. Make sure you're tuned in to ESPN 700. You can catch us on our mobile app or also stream at ESPN700sports.com. Then game day coverage with Bill Riley, Stevenson Sylvester, and Scott Mitchell. We'll take you through the final game of the college football season for Utah. 11 wins is nothing to sneeze at. BYU got their 12th with a win over Georgia Tech over the weekend, but Utah can snag their 11th win. Obviously, it will be the head coaching debut of Morgan Scalley. Petty for Morgan Scalley's thoughts these days, as his to-do list is something that's probably grown. Not that you need it to grow if you're a head coach in college football in the world of P4 football, but you know, if Kyle himself has said he's bringing 7 to 8 assistant coaches with him to Ann Arbor, and we know that Jay Hill is likely one of them, who are the other 6 or 7 that he knows and trusts to do it his way? We've discussed some of the names. Of course, Jason Beck, the offensive coordinator who is dynamite year 1 as a play caller for the Utes, is a name that a lot of people believe that you should land on as far as who could make the jump. Heard a lot of Jim Harding. Obviously, Kyle and Jim are very close, and Jim's work speaks for itself. Jim has ties to the Ann Arbor area, and certainly as much proof of concept as any positional coach you're going to find, including a couple of tackles that will be taken in the first round this year. Unfortunately, Caleb Loma and Spencer Fata will not be playing on Wednesday, but you totally understand that, as their future is predicated on things like the combine and their NFL measurements and such. So they're going to move on and focus on the next step in their career. But Jim Harding feels like the name outside of Jason Beck most linked to a potential move to Ann Arbor. Lewis Powell, who has made a name as a dynamite recruiter around here, coaches the defensive line. Sharif Shah, who might get the defensive coordinator job for Utah, but would he rather go do his thing in Michigan? Only time will tell. As Whit kind of alluded to, he's going to wait until these coaches that are on his list are done coaching their teams, which I think is the right thing to do. And then the transfer portal opens up January the 2nd. One of the things about the Michigan hires, there was a prescient nature to the urgency because of the recruiting that their new head coach will have to do. Seen a couple reports floating out there, but nothing official, that Bryce Underwood, Michigan's quarterback, who was the number 1 recruit in the country last year, will remain in Ann Arbor. And if you're a Ute fan, you breathe a sigh of relief because maybe that means we'll hear Devin Dampier has alluded to the fact that he will be back next year. You have to imagine this news could potentially change that, though, because Devin obviously was dynamic under Jason Beck, who he played for at New Mexico. if Jason takes the Michigan job, does Devin change his mind? I think a lot of people concerned and wondered about that. But if Bryce Underwood signs to come back to Michigan, does that indicate that there's no need for Kyle or even Jason to go recruit Devin to join them in Ann Arbor? Witt himself was asked about the fit of Bryce Underwood in this. Yeah, and when Witt was asked about the offense that he plans on executing for Michigan, he explained exactly what Jason did last year in Utah, right? It was the exact same thing. So the follow-up from the reporter was asking him how Bryce Underwood fits into that scheme, and Witt essentially said it's catered to all of his strengths. So we'll follow the news cycle as far as who could be staying, who could be going. And once the transfer portal opens on January the 2nd, it will be a free-for-all. And my guess would be after Utah's bowl game on Wednesday, we start hearing the news about who potentially is following Kyle to Ann Arbor. And look, it's a really tenuous thing. It's a tough spot for Morgan Scalley. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if the scenario that plays out is Witt takes 4 or 5 Utah coaches and maybe 2, 3 BYU coaches, they go to Ann Arbor, Witt competes for and maybe wins a Big Ten championship, goes to the CFP, and just bursts onto the national scene with his proof of concept in Ann Arbor. And Morgan struggles year one because he's lost like 4 or 5 of his assistants. Like, what is that going to sound like? And what will that ultimately reveal as far as potential regrets of certain people that seem to be behind the move here, meaning Kyle stepping down and then ultimately landing in Ann Arbor? Oh, to be a fly on the wall when Mark Harlan or Morgan Scalley or any of the major donors and boosters who, apparently were maybe part of this decision-making process, when they found out that Kyle was taking the Michigan job. There was no way they could have known that throughout the entire process that certainly has led to this news cycle that has been massive in magnitude and of great interest across the entire country. I don't know if that would have changed anything because also in addition to this, Michigan apparently wanted Kalen DeBoer, who decided to stay in Tuscaloosa. They were interested in Kenny Dillingham, who signed an extension to stay at ASU. And there were some other names on the list before they landed on Witt. It was just interesting because the timing here lined up for a chance for Kyle Whittingham to put himself on a very rarefied, air list of coaches. If he goes to Michigan over the next 5 years, wins some Big 12 championships, and who knows, maybe even wins a national championship or 2, Kyle will be talked about among the best coaches in the sport, in the history of the sport. He's already a Hall of Famer for what he did here in Salt Lake for 21 years. But you'll hear him talked about with the Newt Rockneys and the Tom Osbornes and the Joe Paternos. We could keep going down the list, the Woody Hayeses of the world, if he is able to go do in Ann Arbor what he did here for 21 years. I want to remind you to visit Young Automotive's year-end sales event, December the 26th through January the 3rd. With qualifying purchase, receive a $1,000 Amazon gift card, 5 years of maintenance, and 90 days with no payments when you finance with America First Credit Union. What does Scott Mitchell have to say about this entire storyline? We'll bring in Scott coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700. What is it? What are we doing? See, I know I'm going to be wrong, but it has like Jimmy Buffett vibes.
You got it.
Is it Jimmy Buffett?
Come on, don't doubt yourself.
Huh. I figured it was just one of your old-time country stars that sounded a little Jimmy Buffett-ish.
Come Monday, we're doing all right.
All right. Okay.
It's a long weekend for some in this part.
Yes, it was a long weekend, I think, for anybody that is in the ecosystem of covering college football and trying to, kind of unpack how all this went down. Monday Night Football tonight will conclude your weekend. It's the Rams against the Falcons. Rams a very healthy favorite. They've lost 4 straight Monday Night Football games, though. Puka Nacua has been insanely productive. We'll have Utah men's basketball on the station tonight. There is other things going on outside of Kyle Whittingham taking the Michigan job and Utah football playing in the bowl game on Wednesday. Utah at Washington. Okay, so it's a 9 o'clock p.m. tip, if I'm understanding that correctly, right? It's 9 o'clock p.m.?
Yeah, we'll get pregame going about 8:30.
Okay. So there you go. FS1 has the television coverage if you want to watch the Utes. And then it is on to conference play. I'm not sure if you've seen Arizona play this year. They're insanely good. So is Iowa State. So is BYU, Houston, Oklahoma State, UCF. I think the Big 12 is the best conference in college basketball this year. And Kansas hasn't even played very much with their star, Darren Peterson, yet they're also 10-3 and ranked in the top 20. So year one under Alex Jensen, of course, it will be a process, and Alex needs a little bit more support than he's getting right now to build a roster. Utah Jazz back in action tomorrow. They welcome in the Boston Celtics. Keontae George, who's been awesome, is questionable for that game. The Jazz find themselves in a very precarious spot is what I should say there. It is a difficult thing to try to unpack exactly what they're doing. As of right now, if the season ended today, they would draft 10th, which means they would not draft at all. 0 draft picks when you operate in Salt Lake City and you're in the middle of a rebuild. Seems to be a difficult thing for the fans to swallow, but maybe they're playing well enough, and Keontae's ascension has changed the way they'll approach this year. He is, right now, I think, the runaway favorite to win Most Improved Player in the NBA. So there you go. But Nebraska-Utah coming up on Wednesday. Utah is now a 14-point favorite. That is down, obviously, without Caleb Lomu and without Spencer Fano. I believe Logan is sitting as well, right?
Yep.
Okay. Any
Both
other
the
players?
Fano brothers,
Okay.
Caleb Lomu. Outside of that, it does appear Utah will have a pretty full cast of characters.
Tell me, according to your sources and your connections, Devin Dampier has not officially announced his intent.
No.
I was told by somebody maybe a week and a half ago that he has signed his contract to come back. I don't know if that's the case. The Bryce Underwood reports are out there that he's going back to Ann Arbor to play for Kyle.
Right.
Do you think we see Devin back with Utah next year?
I kind of think so. I'm leaning that way. I think he's probably waiting to see something about his offensive coordinator that he traveled to Salt Lake City specifically to play with. They were a package deal last year. So I'm assuming he's kind of just waiting to get his options. I know there's another Big 12 school down in the desert that's making a hard run at him as well. So Devin Dampier has a handful and 3 to 5 different schools that are probably going to make a good run at him. But I do think, just based on his career, probably would like to stay put if the situation is right and finish his career in a place where obviously he has some comfortability. But I think that's TBD in Devin Dampier world.
Mark Atuaya, running backs coach at Utah, yeah?
Yes.
All right. Well, we can probably take one name off the rumor mill, as according to, I've seen 2 reports now, Kyle is going to retain Tony Alford, who's Michigan's running backs coach.
Yep.
Kyle did allude to the potential of keeping 2 or 3 of the guys on staff around. Is that the number I heard?
Yeah, and I think that's one of them. Obviously, Tony Alford, he's actually got a connection here. His brother Aaron coached for Kyle. There's some Utah connections with Tony Alford as well. So that was one that you kind of could almost Sharpie in as one of the ones that was staying. Obviously, he's really good at the position as well. But I think Mark Atuaya is one to maybe pencil in to stay at Utah and not be part of that carousel.
I'll tell you what, there's a lesson to be learned here. kids, relationships are wildly important. Like if you have earned the trust of a guy like Kyle, and then Kyle gets a job like this, your life could instantly change overnight.
Right. Yeah. I mean, networking is everything. Relationships are everything. Now, some of them are transactional, some of them are sentimental, but in this world, they all matter.
They do. I have to say, I have spent, I've often said I am a former social media addict in recovery. The past 4 or 5 days,
relapse.
I'm back on it, man. Yeah. We've relapsed hard. I've spent an unhealthy amount of time on Twitter, X, whatever, Instagram, just looking for updates of any kind that we can find.
That's the deal. And when it comes to like breaking news, right, stuff that you don't know yet, it's still kind of the place to do it, especially in the sports media world. So yeah, I'm with you there. A lot of scrolling over the last couple of days, and a lot of a lot of things that I wish we could get more into, and I think we will as the weeks go on and as this whole thing kind of finalizes and crystallizes. But wow, what a week, what a weekend!
Yeah, wild weekend, and as I have said a couple of times throughout the show, we can kind of get in our own little bubble here where you kind of believe that maybe because a story is so big for you in your sports talk space, it's big for everybody else, and oftentimes it's not. There's a level of self-importance in this business that I often roll my eyes at. So I rely on a couple of different things to kind of understand the way that the rest of the world is viewing stories that are in our ecosystem instead of believing like everything is such a huge deal. And it's a couple of things. The pull from the newsroom, right, just at a TV station, if they want to put it on a newscast, like when a story from the NBA or the NFL makes it on to CNN or whatever, one of the news channels, and suddenly they're talking about, what happened during a game or off the field, just anything involving the world of sports. This has been, I would say, the biggest story that we've had in our sports ecosystem. Honestly, Porter, maybe ever. And I'm not even kidding. I'm not being hyperbolic. Now, of course, there are things. The Jazz went to the NBA Finals. Michael Jordan played his final game in Salt Lake. That was the highest watched basketball game in the history of the sport. So outside of like Jordan winning a championship here, with that, group of Jazz players, the Olympics have been here in 2002, and of course they're coming back. Those are worldwide stories. But as far as just like a day-to-day sports talk radio topic, like a coach changing teams or a player getting traded, I reference when Hayward left. I did a bunch of I did some national hits with that stuff. Gobert, Mitchell, the COVID stuff. I don't know. This feels as big and as attention-grabbing as almost anything I've covered in my 20 years doing this.
Yeah, and when you consider it kind of also plays into Kalani, Penn State, like it was a whole cycle of stories that kind of culminated in this. And, hey, it's not over. That's the big one. So, yeah, no, I'm with you there. And you mentioned, like, not making it about the self-importance part, right? But just to zero in on me, my career has been following Kyle Whittingham around, his coach's show. Behind the scenes, for game days, I'm in his office taking him to do his interview with Bill Riley. It's a program that, you don't get a whole lot of access with players and whatnot. Spence, I've been doing this for a decade, and every day of it has basically been following Kyle around. So it's huge. It's huge for me, but it's also, yeah, definitely a monster story in the market. Yeah, man, Olympics, the Millers, Ryan Smith taking over for the Jazz, like those are big stories. But this one, because maybe it was not totally expected, and we didn't get much of a warning, maybe a week or so. That is what's making it feel so upfront, and it definitely is.
Can you confirm or deny that you have been the Connor Stallions of Utah football for the past decade?
I would have if they offered.
Oh, I know. I know.
But no intel from me.
Okay, fair enough. Well, look, we'll continue to break this down. Reminder, we're back on live tomorrow, and then we are off Wednesday, Thursday, and back with a live show on Friday where we'll react to the bowl season. We'll have a lot of football to talk about in the transfer portal. We'll open Friday morning, and I'm imagining we're going to hear a lot of news between now and then. All right, Porter, before we say goodnight, what comes our way on a Tuesday edition of the show?
Yeah, on a Tuesday edition of The Drive, we'll chat with Stevenson Sylvester live from Las Vegas. Yogi Roth, the Big Ten analyst, Yogi Roth, will join the program. Mm-hmm. Andy Larson will stop by, as will our guy Foxy. Day Fox.
Oh, man, that's right.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, I guess I work over there in a way now. So we'll welcome Dave in, his 2 Pelotons, his 2 Emmys. Can't wait to get Yogi's take on Witt to Michigan. That'll be a lot of fun, so join us for that. We'll say goodnight. Special thank you today to Scott Mitchell, Bill Bush, Kyle Bonagura, and Tony Parks for any of the sound you may miss from the show today. If you want more content on this seismic story, go to ESPN700sports.com. You can also download our mobile app, and take us on the go. That app is for free, and it is available wherever you get your show. That is available in the App Store or the Google Play Store. What is available wherever you get your shows is our podcast. And we're trying to push some support over there. So wherever you get your shows, just search The Drive with Spence Checketts. And then if they ask you to subscribe, we would appreciate it if you did that. If they ask you to follow, we'd appreciate it if you did that. And then if you have a couple of free minutes throughout the course of this week when you're taking some downtime, if you give us a rating and a review, it actually helps. There's a reason everybody asks you to do it, because it does help out. The Drive with Spence Checketts, available wherever you get your shows. Utah basketball tonight against UW. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Have a great Monday evening. We'll talk to you on a Tuesday drive. And as always, you can find that right here on ESPN 700.